To all interested inhabitants of the town of Sutton, in accordance with the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 48, Section 11, the Zoning Board of Appeals will hold a public hearing at the Sutton Town Hall on May 3rd, 2018, at 7:30 PM on the petition of Damon Bigelow. The petitioner requests a special permit, Section 7A2, as it pertains to 1C 2D of the town zoning bylaws for the construction of a shed. The property as a subject of this petition is located at 29 Heritage Road, as shown on Assessor's Map number 5, parcel number 82. The property is located in the residential rural zoning district. Copy of the petition may be inspected during normal office hours in the town clerk's office located in the town hall. Any person interested or wishing to be heard on this variance petition should appear at the time and place designated. Daniel Petrelli, Board of Appeals Clerk. Come on up, Mr. Bigelow. Welcome. If you'd like to tell us a little bit about your petition.
Well, we want to build a shed. The one that we have there now is kind of falling apart. But it's kind of in the middle of the backyard. We want to move it over to the corner. Not a lot of room over there if I don't put it close to the fence, so I don't want to go way out in the middle of the backyard. It'll kind of render that side of the yard useless if we do.
All right, so you have an existing shed now that's right up against the fence?
Correct.
Alrighty,
Yeah, it's actually a foot off of the fence.
okay.
We want to put it like 4 feet off of each fence line.
It's gonna be a normal height shed, just one,
Yep.
one floor. All right. Any other questions?
All I have for visuals is really just like a picture of the property, so where are we talking about here? Where is the current one, where would it
You
go
have
to?
the
Is there
plan.
another one? Oh, you got it.
It's right underneath that.
It's a new plan.
Oh, it's a new one. Thank you.
Would it have any kind of a foundation, or would it be on blocks, or?
I'd like to put a cement pad rather than the blocks with the wooden floor. That's what we have now, and that's where most of the problem is, animals getting underneath there.
And you're just using the shed for storage?
Yes.
Any other questions?
Mr. Bigelow, what are the dimensions of the existing shed?
I believe it's 8 by 16. And I think he wrote on there that will be coming down.
I see there's a fence. Compared to the fence, what's the height difference gonna be? Is this gonna be?
It's a 6-foot fence. It's just going to be a regular, the walls will probably be 8 feet.
I guess my only question, is 4 feet enough for you, like, just over the years, because there is, I mean, I'm okay with it, I'm not trying to be negative, I'm just, wouldn't you want a little more, what hinders you from pushing it over just a little bit? Just you don't wanna lose the yard?
Exactly. There's really not a lot of room over in that corner.
Oh, topography of it, like, just,
Yeah, from where the house is and the fence line. I mean, I can,
oh, no,
I have a picture that I took from the deck of where it's gonna be if you wanna
Yep.
see it.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I would.
yeah. What's normal, 10, right? I mean,
Crack
10 would
screen.
be for a
She
shed.
dropped it.
Man, I forgot my decision papers on.
Sheds have different than a house.
You got 'em?
It's already relief for accessory.
See, I put,
Okay.
I put stakes in the ground.
Front
There's
and
one
side
missing over here. It
and
sits
rear,
right in front of
Instead
the
of 50,
fire pit,
50,
which is
20,
gone.
20.
Right.
House.
Thank you.
It sits behind the fire pit. Oh, no, I see,
Yeah, no,
right.
the stake would be right in front of it. It's down, but,
So essentially, it sits on the fire pit.
yeah, that's gonna be gone.
On the plot plan, neighbors, structures and stuff like that aren't indicated. Where would the closest?
My neighbor's house is probably 30 feet, 40 feet, somewhere in here.
Okay.
And this one over here, it's way up over here.
And one of the things that we had received was an email from a neighbor in support. Would that be one of these two?
I don't know who the email was from.
Is that for this one?
I don't think that was for
Gonna
this
stick kinda
one.
right
That
where
wasn't for this one?
I
I
think it
haven't
is.
received anything on this one.
It's not here.
There's one attached, yeah.
Damon has brought to attention he'd like to build a shed at the rear of his property in 29 Heritage Road.
Yeah, I'll read that.
Yeah.
Oh, did you
Richard.
submit this with the application, maybe?
Richard Courtney?
Oh, he wrote a letter, yeah.
So it'd be behind the fire pit, or?
Kinda right where it
The
is.
stake is gonna be, was right in front of the fire pit.
Okay.
I took it down the other day mowing the lawn.
Okay.
Intentionally?
See it staked off?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've taken a few things down the lawnmower.
That's why you wear a headset so you don't hear it.
Yeah. Is there anyone here who would like to speak for or against this petition? Sir? You could state your name for the record, please?
Jim Knoll, 25 Heritage Road. Can I sit here?
Sure can.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd just like to say that I've known Damon quite a few years, and he's been my next-door neighbor for 7. And he maintains impeccable property in this, and he's quite a good carpenter as well. And I can imagine what this shed is going to be look like. It's going to be a credit to the neighborhood. And I can't think of anybody that would have a problem with it, because you can't see it from two sides. So that's all I wanted to say. I said, I can't see any reason why this permit isn't granted. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thanks for coming. We also received a letter from Richard Courtney, 28 Heritage Road, to whom it may concern. Damon has brought to my attention that he would like to build a shed at the rear of his property at 29 Heritage Road. I have no objection and will help and support him in any way possible. He is a neighborhood car, tractor, lawnmower, go-to guy for how to fix, what to do info. Always there, just a great guy. Richard Courtney. Any other questions or comments?
I guess mine would have been in line with what Mike was saying before we looked at the photograph, is could you move the shed to within the side setback of 10 feet? It's another 6 feet. It will give you more room around the back of the shed on both
We're only
sides.
you're gonna be off the deck maybe 15 feet, and that's kinda,
Oh, it's that tight.
It's
It's hard
tight.
to tell from the
It-
paper. I
I mean,
hate paper and plans.
it's pretty tight over there. If I was to move that off of your line 10 feet, right? That would be right next to the deck.
Yeah, right.
Oh, I see, yep, because that line represents 10 feet now? Is that what those dotted lines?
Yeah, the setbacks, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
so if
they
you put
looked
it-
big. I thought they were actually the 20 and
Oh,
the
I thought it was
50.
20 as well.
I did too,
No,
Rich.
those are
That's what-
those are 20-foot setbacks, because the 16 plus the 4 equals the 20, so that is as drawn 20 feet.
Ah,
Oh, I see.
So those are 20.
yep. So 10 would be here and here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm good
Why
for
is
now.
the lot, yep. It's 132.
Anything else? Anybody else? What are you thinking, Mike?
No, it's just 1 inch equals 20 feet. And if you moved it 6 feet from where it is now, how does it get? You sure it's 15 feet to the deck?
Well, I mean, I'm guessing it's not.
I guess just to say it out loud, just so they made all this zoning, and it's not to not wanna grant a variance for this, what's the reason, maybe? It's all, like, so what stops it from, because 10 is a pretty, how do we say it, lenient setback? It's not that far, and I know it's just hard without seeing it. I don't wanna do a site visit for a shed, I'm not trying to slow down a shed, but I just think we have to always, if there's, for a shed to change the zoning setback. I mean, if it's tight and there was no room and it's a really small lot, then that I agree with, you're just not selling me on the reason yet. Like, help me, let's discuss it some more before we close the public hearing, is all I ask. Like, just help me to understand that it really is that tight,
Well-
and that 6 feet wouldn't matter, like, cause I mean, of course, we want you to have a shed, no one's ever, like, dismissing any of the reasons why and how come,
Well,
and,
I guess what I'd like to say then is, if it's a fence there,
yeah,
and I move the shed 10 feet away from that fence,
yeah.
that property behind it is useless. What am I gonna go, sit in a lawn chair behind the shed, you know what I'm saying? What's the point of,
Well, I didn't make the zoning in town, like, so I didn't create all.
I'm not saying that, I'm just,
There had to be I'd like to think that we don't just have zoning for no reason at all. And we have lots of stuff come in front of us, and we very rarely have, there's usually a reason, like, it's an existing house, it's 6 feet from the property line, I know we have an existing shed, but it's an opportunity to be more
make it
conforming.
conforming, yeah.
But if it's that close and it's that small, I mean, if you're literally 15 feet, then I would say, well, that's a huge encroachment on the house, but
Well, right now, if you look at
Maybe
it,
it is,
it's
I just
20,
think-
it's 20 scale, so it's about, I'd say, the way he's got it proposed here, it's about 25 feet.
25 feet, right?
so
if he
every
put
foot
it-
counts.
Yeah, I think.
So that would be our
kinda
reason why. I mean, it's a very small property to push this.
Push
all
the
that I-
shed.
So we have to, when we make a decision, we have to have a reason why we allow you to go in the setback. So this discussion right now isn't to say yes or no for me.
Yep.
It's to, when we close the public hearing and have to vote on it and say why we are allowing it, it's better to have it covered, there's a reason. That's all, just so we know.
Where is your septic system? It's not in, the well is indicated on the,
the well is indicated, yes. The septic on the other side of the deck in front of the shed is clean out. And then just between the shed and that clean out is the D-box. Now, I've been to the town, I can't find the septic design. I don't know where else I would find that.
would moving the shed interfere with your leaching
No,
field?
No, because I actually think the existing shed is above the leach field now.
Okay.
Probably.
I guess
According
it
to the
carries some
D-box,
weight
the
that he's
D-box
already
is
got a
probably
shed
5
a few
feet off
feet
the
off
corner
the
of that
property.
shed.
that
Yeah,
he's
one
willing to-
foot.
Going towards
that he's
the back.
willing to tear down, and I guess some of the language we use is less, more non-conforming,
Yeah.
and I guess taking it and pushing it to the back of the property could be some good reasoning of why we're putting it in a smaller lot. It encroaches in the house, and he already had an existing shed that was close to the property line that they're willing to take down. Right, and then this would
was
make
like
sense.
1 foot off, you said? The existing one?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
looks real, it's even closer than it is now.
When where it's, with the setbacks, you don't want your neighbor's, buildings like encroaching on you, but since it's partially hidden by the fence.
I think that
I don't think it would
helps.
change like the view too much.
So I guess after talking it out, having the existing shed, I'm good, I don't have any questions.
I mean, it'll be like a little bit higher, but.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
The roof
basically.
pitch isn't gonna be something to sneak a half of nothing, it's just gonna be a
gonna be a
shed
regular
with a
shed.
regular roof
Yep.
pitch with a,
Yep.
right?
All right,
I'm good.
everybody's good? And we're not gonna do a site visit?
no.
So I'll entertain a motion to close the hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second that.
All those in favor? Aye. All right, we'll do a work session after, and Lynn will let you know.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, I'll entertain a motion to reopen hearing on 38 Horn Drive.
Make a motion to reopen the hearing?
Second on that?
Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We knew what you meant. Welcome back.
Thank you. Looking for a plan and not paying attention. Yeah.
So,
This is that one here?
Here's the,
We have the site plan.
Thank you. Not so worried about the house. Just wanted to stick and sit this time.
So we conducted a site visit last month, after last month's meeting. You guys have any more new information or anything you'd like to add?
no, we're staying with the design we had at that time. We feel that the location of the garage is, the best location in terms of not blocking the view of others and conforming with the topography of the lot, in the most practical manner. The design tries to blend in the addition to the existing house as much as possible. So we feel that this is the best design for the site.
Oh, I need to read in. This is the one, right? All right, we had a couple of members absent at the last meeting, but they've since gotten up to speed. But for the record, in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 39, Section 23D, I, Richard Haskins, hereby certify that I have examined the audio, video, and/or written transcript of the public hearing heard by the Board of Appeals held on April 5th, 2018, and I certify that I have complete knowledge and understanding of all elements contained therein. Also, in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 39, Section 23D, I, Daniel Petrelli, hereby certify that I have examined the audio, video, and/or written transcript of the public hearing heard by the Board of Appeals held on April 5th, 2018, and I certify that I have complete knowledge and understanding of all elements contained therein. So everyone's up to speed. So are there any more questions, anything from the board?
Is there anybody from the neighbors, just after the site visit, was there any more feedback?
Is there anyone here
Next
who,
door that's here now?
I'm sorry?
is there anyone here who'd like to
Just
speak
interrupt.
for or against?
I'm Michael Goodfriend, and my wife and I live directly west of the Bard property. I'm here to lend our support to their project.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Mike, you have some questions?
So I guess, after the site visit and really looking at it, it's such an odd-shaped lot, and they can't help with the placement of the house, and I surely, just at least talked out the last, getting into but they don't have a choice, they can't move their house, they have an odd-shaped lot. These are the irregularity that don't exist anymore that we have to understand, to give relief to. It doesn't allow people to have normal, a two-car garage, I don't think is.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lake lot, right?
It's a lake lot. Nobody meant for it to be narrow and have this great big piece, and they got lots of room for a septic and a well and all the things that, we wanna make sure that the land can support and understand all that. So I have no other questions on it.
We had some concerns from a butter over the losing maybe some potential view of the lake, but and I think when we did the site visit, and their main view is towards the cove part of the lake,
I just think
so
there's
I mean it's
so much property that's owned between there and I think it's hard to start to dictate to neighbors about what should go on. I think that's a really tough area right there for me
Yeah,
to even
I
visit.
agree.
Just, where would that discussion end?
Well, I think their elevations kind of were respectful to the.
Yeah.
at
yeah,
least the neighbors, so.
I think so. I think they've done what they could with it.
Well, I'm sorry I missed the other meeting. I did have a chance to drive by and take a look. We get a lot of lakeside, non-conforming lots, and it feels like a lot of requests for a garage, you know. And I think a lot of times our decision, we make some consideration for safety concerns. You know, we've got people parking in the street, getting in and out of the car in the street. I don't think that's a factor here, or this is the sort of end of the road. Also, a lot of times we're dealing with these like sort of narrow lots, you know, and there's no option but to build in a setback. And I mean, maybe I'm mistaken. It doesn't seem like that's a factor here either. It's like this is, if I'm not mistaken, the only side that is conforming is on this side, and this would put something into that setback, which is not ideal. And I just wonder if there's a different way. I mean, there's a lot of land here, right?
We had examined putting it in a different location or offsetting it more. The problem with that is when you do that, you come up with, you actually create several problems. Offsetting it downhill in order to avoid the side setback would further impair the view for the good friends, and we're trying to accommodate them as best we can. Also, if you do that, the connection with the house becomes more difficult, and the relative elevation of the addition and the garage become more difficult, and actually grading, because the lot slopes so much, when you push it back, you end up with a steep grade going into the driveway, and everything else, you know, while it will conform to the zoning setbacks better, everything else kind of becomes more difficult if you try to reposition it.
I guess I'm struggling a little bit with, there's two things that you're really asking for a special permit as it relates to. One is increasing the footprint of the house by more than 30% for a non-conforming structure, and what's requested here is in excess of 60. And the other is to take the only conforming setback and half it to 10 feet. And we're referring to it as a garage addition, but the garage represents less than a third of the square footage of the addition itself. So I'm just struggling with all of that together.
Yeah.
Right? When you put all of those things to any one of those is part of, and the house as it sits right now is a 3,000 square foot house, and the addition would bring it to over 5,000, I believe. So it's not one of these little cottages that need special help to, you know, essentially with the special permits on the cottages, we're giving them essentially what they'd be entitled to the extent that the place burned down, right? Which is rebuilding within an existing footprint, and that's just not the case here.
If I
Please,
Yeah,
I
let
threw
me
it out
speak-
there for
yeah.
discussion, right?
Yeah, we feel that regarding the special permit, that it would be in accordance with the other houses in that area. If I can, I put together a very rough picture of the house and the neighboring houses, if I can just find it in my file here. So Mr. Picard's house is actually one of the smaller houses in that area of the cove. So actually the addition, at least regarding the footprint, would make it equal to, or in some cases still smaller than, the houses nearby.
Can I address the square footage real quick?
Sure.
So, like, if we were just doing a two-car garage, but we are, because space is so valuable on the lake, you know, storage and all that, is we're doing a slab on slab for the garage. You know, so that gets you extra footage that normally you just have dirt under it.
Or you'd be foolish not to use the basement space,
So,
right?
so
No,
all of
I
a sudden you're like, this little footprint looks, you know, if you do the square footage, it looks this, but it's really, we're stacking it. You know, follow what I'm saying, with there's some extra footage there that, you know, most people would just take right off the top and not even, you know,
So, I mean,
include it.
intuitively, it looks from above kind of like the other houses, but I mean, do you have a comparison in square footage between
Yeah,
like
I'd be curious to,
your
yeah.
like what this house would be with the addition versus like, you know,
'Cause if
42,
these
for
aren't
example, or
3 stories each, then it's a different question, you know?
And the addition is a big mass, right? I mean, it's in the, you know, it's a full ridge height matching.
Yeah.
You know, it's a big.
Yeah, we did with,
It's adding a house to a house essentially,
Mm-hmm.
right?
well, with the two-car garage, when you only have 30, 30-foot little box, type of deal. That definitely, you put a two-car garage, all of a sudden you're like, yeah, spot.
So for the engineer, just clarification. Special permit, I know sometimes we can, I believe the only variance that the only thing that he needs relief from is the side setback.
And increasing the footprint by over 30%.
No, but it goes lot coverage is the way we do it in town. It's
The-
10% max and he's under that, so.
No, in a non-conforming structure,
Yeah,
it requires a special permit to increase the square footage, the footprint of the house by more than 30%.
yeah, oh, okay, that, I just didn't so there's two things that
So
we
there's
have.
two
yeah, I
things
thought
that
he
we're
was
considering.
referring-
One is increasing the footprint by 66%, 65% roughly, and the other is setback relief of 10 feet.
On a non-conforming lot.
On a
In addition to
non-conforming
the 10% lot coverage.
A non-conforming structure on a non-conforming lot. So you've got lot coverage, and then you've got, to the extent that you increase the footprint, if, on a non-conforming house with a non-conforming lot, if you don't,
Yeah,
you're allowed 30% if you don't create any additional non-conformances.
and he's over that. Where does that,
So he's creating a non-conformance by the setback and increasing the size of it by over 30%.
And right now, so it's below 10% lot coverage, would this bring it above 10%?
I'm just going by
No,
what,
it's
you know what, I
still
let the
below. Still
engineer
below.
answer that, but
It's on
it appears
9.3.
to.
Okay,
So there's two things.
so the two, okay.
Non-conforming triggers the size of
Of the addition.
that you can add to
So
the house.
1D2, or 12D, any non-conforming structure may be extended by right up to 30% of the square footage of its footprint, as long as no nonconformities are created or increased. Any increase beyond 30% or creation increase of a nonconformity shall only be allowed pursuant to a special permit granted by the ZBA.
So what are we at right now? What is, I know a grader, but what is it?
So it's 60 over 65,
The size of this new addition?
yeah, of the
If
existing.
you just, do the
Adding
area summary, we put that in a calculator, yeah.
Oh,
Do you have that color one? This is the new one, huh?
And I guess this is unique. Usually it's a tear down to replace similar to what's there. Sometimes they're a little bigger, but
Right.
where this is. Well, thank you. That was good.
Did my research.
No, I didn't doubt you. I just,
No, I've given this a lot of thought.
I
It's,
thought of
it's-
the
it's-
lot coverage as kind of the thing in the
That's
past
what I was
that
thinking of, those as
we
the
always
coverage.
paid attention to, because it's spelled out on the plans. And it's something to be mindful for. Again, that's what zoning was created in town to not. So at a quick glance, one of the reasons it didn't seem so bad is they didn't exceed that 10%. And that's of, even though it's non-conforming, it's 10%, so when the lot's smaller, they have less they can cover. So with the way the law is written, that, to us, always came into play just as a big factor, because that's how much land you have, and if you're covering, some like 40 and 50%, and you start to say, well, you had 20 and now you want 50 and there's no land,
That played a big part in variances.
right, in the past, and this is nice to know though, and this is a newer one in the sense, I've been on a while now, and adding a big addition to a home that's on a non-conform, maybe you've been a lot here twice as long as me, and maybe you can remember,
Yeah, I don't remember the 30% coming up though.
well,
But I
it's
mean,
a lot of
that's-
pages and a lot of, that's why we,
So what's
it's glad to have different people, I
That's
mean,
why
that's.
retirees, right?
That's why there's 6, 7 people on a board, and it's really, I mean,
so what's the
no one wants to
percent?
get
What's the
anything wrong,
increase
and
in
nobody wants to.
percentage? Do you-
It's 60, so the footprint, you're adding 700 and change in square foot to 1,000 and change footprint. Like 1,100 square feet is the current footprint, and they're adding 7 and a bit, I think.
Yep.
3 levels.
So the 3 levels come into play into that?
It's based on footprint, it's not
Footprint,
square
right.
footage, right? I mean, it comes into the play to the extent that this, the special permit's conditioned.
It's one of the conditions.
It could be, right? I mean, it doesn't, right?
I guess for me, cause there's, I don't wanna say so much land, and not to get hung up on that 10%, but he wants a two-car garage. I know he's getting some extra space out of it, but do we start to, like I said, I go back to originally when I looked at it for the last time tonight, and just looked at it and said the septic is way, and he's got plenty of room, and it's got a well, he's got plenty of land here, and adding a two-car garage. I guess there's some additional living spaces on the floors. I agree after the site visit, as much as we could say, sure, let's just push it back till he's got the 20 feet. And then I think he'd still need the special permit, cause he's
Yeah, he'd
30%.
push on an envelope
Right, so
someplace
no matter
else,
what we
yeah.
do, we still,
So he'll be back.
so I guess for myself, I'll just use my judgment to say, to acquire a two-car garage, it's 28, 26. Have discussion about a small, so in the past, we definitely have had, where we have plans, and I know that's what the clients want, and people, and we've talked about different things, we can't tell people what to do, but we have encouraged modification to plans to be maybe a little smaller and not so big. If that helped all of, everybody on the board, I mean, Rich has been here for a while, I'm just talking discussion of, and trying to be consistent. So, just from being a developer and a builder, and I've built a lot of garages and houses, I mean, I'm not gonna tell you it's a huge garage, but it's definitely, I'd use the words oversized. 24 by 24, as far as parking two cars, you're pretty much gonna park a full-size truck. You know, a full-size pickup truck, 4 doors with that bed, 6.5, whatever it is. I mean, how wide is it? I mean, so how much of an impact are we putting on his project, and how much less non-conforming is the project gonna be? Because that's all we're trying to do, is just come to a thing that we feel comfortable to allow them to add on to a house on a non-conforming lot. How wide is it? I just looked quickly.
26 by 20.
28 wide.
28 wide, so if you went to 24 and lost 4 feet,
Still be non-conforming. it just
well, but
means-
instead of 6.6 feet to that corner, now you're 10.6
Yeah.
feet.
I
If
think that's
your
probably, I
square
think that's
footage,
the way it was originally submitted, it was 2 feet narrower, right? It grew 2 feet from the original submission,
That was
or that was,
mistake.
the setback was calculated wrong.
so what's the depth of the garage?
20, 26 deep this way.
So there's a two, I mean, I'm just not trying to tell somebody what to do, but
No.
a 24 by 24 garage would be a very usable garage. We wouldn't be trying to limit it to, small cars. You get smaller than 24 by 24. Mid-sized cars are gonna fit, at 22 by 22. I wouldn't get any narrower than that.
That's pretty small.
Yeah, I mean, that,
They're not.
so if some of us weren't comfortable and we wanted to have some discussion about a different design, just give me a minute, I promise you get to talk, don't worry. You've brought up some good points as we've had discussion, so I guess I won't say any more. Just,
Go ahead.
Oh,
Anyone would like to add?
I hear what you're saying. I mean, that was our struggle, like, what's the right fit for the house? And the reason we went over a little bit more was stairs to get in, because the elevation of the garage is about 2.5 feet lower than the actual house. So we're gonna have a flight of stairs going, not a flight, but you know what I mean. The elevation doesn't line up, so you're not egressing out to a 24-foot garage, walking into a car, having a flight of stairs. Follow what I'm saying? That's why we went over a little bit.
so the
Was-
stairs, hold on.
Sorry,
Back
no,
up.
go
It's
ahead.
hard, so,
No,
is
no.
it depicted on the plans? It would be easier if, like,
Well,
so we
Mike,
spent all this money for these
Or the
beautiful
stairs.
plans.
No, no.
Mike, what he's saying is, I think just as
I wanna
stairs,
just see it on the plans.
with stairs coming into the house are gonna take away some of the space in the garage.
Is
That's
there, are
usually
you
what-
able to
Yeah,
recess
well-
into the existing house? Is it 2 steps?
No,
Is it
the
6 steps?
house-
At 24 wide, there's still room for stairs into the house. You could do at least 2 rise and 1 step, like, you could, 10, 20 inches, you could come off that wall. So that'd be 3 rise, 2 steps. You don't wanna design your house,
Well, no, I just.
I don't want to be argumentative.
But
If you're gonna
that's
start
what
to say
drove us.
stairs, and we're gonna have a discussion about what we can and can't do. So what you can't do is build a landing that big, but that isn't what you have to have for code. That could just be 2 steps.
I thought you meant like.
So, and I'm not trying to design your house, but those stairs for me wouldn't drive enough to tell you your garage
Here,
should be that
maybe, is
big.
that what he's talking about?
I'll say it
Like
again,
garage
24 by
to-
24 would be a very sufficient sized garage for 2 cars.
Where
And
are
if
your,
you left-
where are they on the plans? Where are the stairs at?
Where would the stairs be? Like, are we talking about right
Yeah, right
here?
there, that landing right there, so you come out.
Page
and you wanna-
A3.
So you don't walk into the car, you know.
Understood.
You pivot and go down. That's what drove the depth over, was just, you know, with kids.
So from a bylaw standpoint, there really is a hardship other than you want to build your garage next to your house, and not doing that would create a personal hardship, but not a financial hardship, and not as a result of soil or topography. So if you were to leave that forward, the wall closest to the lake, again, I'm with Mike, I don't want to design your house, but if you left that wall, and brought the wall closest to the road back, and the outside wall in a little bit to reduce the size of the garage, I think you get pretty darn close to your 20 feet.
There is one thing about the location of the wall nearest the road, which is that they're using an existing, like the existing framework going into the mudroom to get into that garage, and if you push that back, then access would have to be through the living room.
Which one? The lower level or the basement? What is he saying?
I think it's A3.
He's saying what?
He explained that with this wall here, you get 2 steps to go up into the existing house.
Yep.
And if you bring this wall back,
No, why wouldn't you go further away from the lake? We just said one of the reasons your neighbors were keeping it away, so 2 feet.
because this is the corner that's 12 feet.
Oh, right.
So I was
we're
thinking
talking
if we
about
moved that
pushing it
there.
back. Right, yeah, no, I'm
And
sorry.
again, it's not, that part
moved
isn't
the
my
door.
job.
Yeah.
So, for argument's sake, if you went down to say 24 by 24, what's the percentage gonna be?
Well, 4 feet off the lane.
Jim the math guy.
Get the calculator.
It would be over 30 still. I mean, 30% would be about 300 square feet, give or take, because,
Right,
so
so I
that would
mean
be 15 by 20 is 300 square feet. So roughly, and these are all,
Half
right,
inch,
you can
yeah.
challenge my numbers, but roughly 15 by 20 would be conforming with the, and a 15 by 20 would fit within the setback too.
It'd reduce it by like, I think, 150 square feet, more or less. From what we're talking about now.
7 to, no, it would, it would,
725
that
to
would be half,
575?
15 by 20 would be roughly half of the size, right?
Oh, yeah, I'm talking about 24 by 24.
24 by 24. I don't have a calculator. There you go. So yeah, it would reduce it by a couple hundred feet, 150.
So, I mean, if you shrunk it down a little bit, but if you held the front wall, then you're not doing anything to help with that setback.
Right.
Well, we could
And then
ask,
you're still gonna be over the 30%.
Right.
Any 2-car garage is gonna be over, yeah.
So I guess, I mean,
You're still not
to
conforming.
me, it's like, yeah, if you're still non-conforming, then
Go big or go home.
you said it, not me. Well, I mean, really, it's, you know, I don't know, it's another argument to it, I guess.
I'm just saying things that could be done. There's a little room in the front wall, call it 12 inches in the front, 12 inches in the back, 4 feet off the end. You're probably getting to be 11, 12 feet. You allow sheds, so now at least the building is in somewhat of a setback. It's just something to consider, I mean, it's 3 stories tall. In the past,
big.
we've had major discussions over projects like this.
I mean, I believe one of the neighbors may be 32, like the garage is attached, but it's a floor lower than the rest of the house.
If I recall, though, you only see 1 story above grade, or there's a garage, then there's a 2nd story, and then there's the basement. Oh, so it is 2 stories.
So the lakeside, 3 stories, and driveway side, 2 stories. There's elevations of it.
Yeah, and that bottom story has
talking about that big cantilever section. But you're just talking footprint, so they got a section that's even bigger.
Yeah,
I didn't notice that.
The upstairs bedroom.
cantilever.
Yeah.
On the front end of that.
I mean, to me, to do the space under the garage is given, that just makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd be an idiot. not to.
Yeah, you'd be crazy not to, yeah, that just, and the garage, 24 by 24, and then the second story space. We did have the letter from the neighbor just to be mindful of it. We don't wanna discuss it in the way of, like, just the building itself and how big the nonconformity is and some of allowing a three-story structure. Cause another thing we can do is allow a garage, allow space underneath the garage. And, I mean, it's another whole story above that is always really
mean,
nice.
The only thing, like, I was looking, when we were at the site visit, I was looking at it like that too, if you didn't put the second floor on, but if you didn't put the second floor on, the roof's still gonna go almost probably to here.
Well,
So-
8 feet lower, say, from what we see in the elevations.
Yeah,
Is
but
that
the
a whole
top of
lot?
that roof's gonna be probably at the bottom of this roof now.
Well, if you take the wall, the roof would just,
Right,
it'd be
so I
8
mean,
feet, but 8 feet
yeah.
isn't that, yeah, no, I see
It
your
would
point.
still be, I mean, this, it's bigger obviously than if you didn't have the second floor, but I mean, it's still, I think it's still gonna look big.
But that has
if you
nothing
did
to do with that 30%, yeah, that's
No,
just.
yeah,
like-
because it's still
just
just
the
a
cantilever section.
It just so happens that the plan is submitted is roughly 65, you know, the way the square footages work, cause they're both three-story
Yeah,
additions, square
right,
footage and footprint kind of follow the same ratio.
Yep.
Yeah, I know. Taking a floor off doesn't change either the two things we're. they're
No,
looking
the other
for.
right.
And do we leave it more detrimental if it's 28 or 24? Alls they throw out is what we could do and still establish giving them
Right.
a two-car garage, not, I
Right,
guess
I
then
mean,
the
that's a good
discussion.
point. Is it
So the
gonna be-
final wrap-up would be, because the thing we're supposed to make sure that we don't leave something horrific for maybe a neighbor that doesn't in favor of it.
We gotta be careful, like what we're allowing to, in case, like, you know, maybe the sheer number of square feet, then someone else comes to us and say, you know, we've got 5,000 next door, we'd like to get up to that number, you know?
Wouldn't it be curious to see what the square footage is like compared to the other, like what would this
I would
bring
be
in?
curious about that too, yeah, I mean, certainly like from this perspective, it looks good, but I don't know if these are 3-story homes also, right?
Just to wrap up on my perspective, this weird mouth really hampered this lot.
Yeah.
I think after discussing, we're splitting hairs 2, 3, 4 feet, and somebody doesn't get the space, how they wanted their home to flow. He's not over the lot coverage, and to me, that was always an important thing, because you're gonna see some projects come with 30 and 40%.
Yeah.
And then you'll go to the sites and see them staked out, and so for me, this is a bigger than normal lot that I see.
Does that lot coverage include what's across the road as well?
Well, that's
Or
all
is it
part of his
just
piece.
down?
Yeah, it's all his
Our
piece.
septic field's up the hill.
Yeah, but
Right,
it's all,
it's
I
all
mean,
one-
Yeah.
I look at it, that's his
That's
piece of
one
property,
piece,
yeah.
Yeah.
And everybody's nice enough, and that's just how
House-
old camps are, I mean, those,
And the house just has to be in the narrow part, you know, right next to it, yeah.
and if,
Oh, sorry.
and if we say the 8 feet difference, if we really impact on a view that's elevated behind, so I don't think that a second story makes that big of a difference. We are setting a precedence as far as the volume of the house in the bylaw, not a precedence, but this is unique. But I think the lot trumps it, that narrowness on a lot this large, just think if it was wider, we'd still have the 30%, but this lot would look a lot different.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if this was a normal lot,
And some of-
and the lot line was here,
Yeah,
and it was
and-
like a rectangle like that, he'd be,
And these camps
Maybe
created it, and you're coming down
75%
winding
coverage.
roads, and they tried to make it work for everybody, and so for me, I think I'm okay. I don't need any more discussion, let's say that.
yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, if the 30% is an issue, then the only way we're gonna get them close is to cut the thing in half, and that's, you know, that's no good. I'm sure that's not what they want, but I mean, if you're gonna go over the 30, you know, if you're gonna go 24 by 24 and we're gonna be almost where we are now, then
I
to
don't
me,
think it
I'm-
hurts the town either, I mean, this isn't gonna be anything that leaves any,
I mean, the direct abutters,
I'm sure his
In
tax
favor of it.
value will go up on a house that's already existing, that's not really ever gonna add. Are you adding a bedroom to it? Is it going from a 2 to a 3?
It's three-bedroom and staying a three-bedroom.
Staying a three-bedroom, so we're not increasing bedrooms, so we're not, that would be probably increasing the nonconformity, so we're not. That's what I'm saying, I mean, that bottleneck lot, every time I look at this plan, that's all I see, is if we just stretch it out, it would look better on paper. And when we went out there, and we know the property lines, but there's plenty of room between him and the neighbor.
Yep.
And right now, currently, at least none of the neighbors see that that would be a problem for the future too. So when a neighbor weighs in for me, he's kind of saying, hey, guys, we live down there, and this is gonna be cool with everybody, especially when you got a couple of them that all say the same thing. So I mean, if somebody's to help us make a judgment call of what somebody else would deal with, I mean, somebody that would have substantial investment down there is saying,
Yep.
it's cool.
That's what I mean, yeah,
So-
I agree with
Like I
that.
said, I have no more discussion, I don't wanna ramble on, we'll be here forever.
Well, we had some abutters in support and then some sort of asking questions, right? So I don't construe that
It was
as.
mainly that concerning the view of the,
Okay.
but
And
they
so-
still have a view of the cove, I think was the.
And
they're-
I
so
think
they're
there's still
content now,
quite
or-
a bit of room between the two houses, and I think, just the way the houses are all laid out down there, it's not like the house, it's not, you know, just my opinion after going there, it didn't seem. that it
Well, I
would
think
make
it's
that
pretty
big of
hard
a-
to come out and oppose a project from your neighbor, you know?
Yeah.
Like, you gotta live next to them after that, so. I don't
We've had plenty.
necessarily construe silence as consent here, you know, it's like, I think we
Well, I
gotta.
think that at the site visit, everybody was pretty much in
They were there?
favor.
Okay,
The only one who objected was the one who had written in, who was up
Yeah,
here
the
about their
email from
view,
the-
but, I
from
mean, that
Texas, right?
house really faces that way. I mean,
That's this one
this
here?
will potentially interfere with a,
this one?
Yep.
yeah.
Okay, okay.
But I mean, the front of the house is that way, they have some side view over there, but they're
Right.
still gonna have a view of the lake, and they have a lot of trees in here anyway, so once the leaves come out, I'm not sure how much they really have.
I see.
Lynn looked into the legal part of that.
They have no rights to
They
it.
have
No right to a
they
view,
have
yeah, I
no
know
real
Well, but the
legal
elevation too,
right
the
to
new
the
building,
view.
I don't think it's gone, like, I think, cause their house is so elevated, and after being
Yeah.
there for
There's
me.
still a view, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think
Yeah.
that by no means did we have this going on and then somebody did this.
Right.
Well, no, I just don't think that's the case. I think
Sure.
we had the major difference in elevation for me
Right.
just to stand there and look back and say, you know,
Yeah.
who would want, you know, obviously, I think he would be at the meeting if he truly was gonna have a skyscraper that
We walked
really.
up into their
Yeah,
yard.
yeah,
so,
and I mean, I think it's the best.
Yeah, no, I just, that's what I observed
It's
is,
the best possible plan for the way the lot is
Sure.
kind of
and go
Yeah.
back to, you know.
shaped.
I mean, anytime there's just a three-story addition, like in a setback where there wasn't one before, I want us to be very careful about it, you know?
I promise we beat him to death. This poor guy thought he was getting a small garage 10 minutes ago. Well, just remember, the setbacks are why we all love Sutton, so no one's ever trying to give anybody a hard time. It's just, you have to make sure that what we do doesn't leave something for the future that's
Yep.
devaluing to another piece of property.
Definitely, yep.
So I see your concerns. But it'd be a property that could never have a, see, this is for me why this board exists, is these non-conforming lots, and it's an opportunity to give a garage to an existing house that is a better way of living. And I don't think, once again, it's not more detrimental to the neighborhood, it's a residential home, two-car garage, plenty of room for a septic. I'm not continuing trying to be positive, I have nothing to gain from this, it's just, I guess it makes sense to me, yeah.
All right, any other discussion? Gentlemen, anything you'd like to add?
Thank you.
I entertain a motion to close the hearing.
Make a motion to close the hearing.
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor? Aye. All right, we'll do a work session a little later, and then I'll let you know. So next on the agenda was the TJJ Development. They've sent in this letter. Pursuant to our conversation, please accept this email as a formal request to continue the public hearing for 182 Manchog Road to the next hearing date. I have taken over control of this project, and I will see that the tight tank application is promptly submitted to the Board of Health so that the ZBA can take action on this application at their next hearing. We appreciate your understanding and patience in this situation. Thank you. Stephen O'Connell, Andrews Survey and Engineering. So I'll entertain a motion to continue this TJJ development hearing to next month
I'll make a motion to continue 182 Manchog to,
when Lynn gets back. We'll decide when.
I'll continue it until Lynn gets back.
Next month.
next month.
Yes.
So the septic thing wasn't all the way they kinda, is that?
I believe that they have,
Open the public hearing and talk a little bit? We did a site visit since then.
we did a site visit before then, didn't we?
We haven't had a
Couple months
meeting
ago?
since, oh yeah, we came
we
back
did.
once, okay, yeah. Yep, you're right.
Yeah, I think that they're still, they just haven't gotten the information we requested, that's all.
Okay.
So,
It's number 2 there, accuracy of public sewage and water
Yep.
systems, so.
Yep.
Can't grant it without it.
Go ahead.
No.
I don't need my vote to continue on this.
we have minutes in front of us from April.
Ah,
Sure.
Has everyone reviewed them?
see.
It's always sink or mile somewhere.
I think that's how the saying goes. Yes.
So if everyone is good with the minutes?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes of April 5, 2018 as written and submitted.
I'll second that motion.
All those in favor? Aye. What's today, 3rd? Next up, we have a last-minute addition.
Do we want to continue that to June 7th?
Oh, is that what it was?
That's where we were, yes.
Yeah, we're continuing that to
Continue the 182 man chart.
7:35.
7:35 on June 7th.
Aye.
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 Get too far ahead of you.
All right. John, I'll take over that cool breeze for
Maybe we
you.
should just
Bring
all
it
meet
over
back
here.
there.
Oh, there you go.
All right,
Wondered why I was sitting in the corner then, man.
step down for a few minutes. Get the cool breeze.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Good job.
Okay, give him a raise.
Just not me.
Good evening, my name's John Burns, I'm here for the Leland Hill Estates development. We're kind of in the wrapping up stage and we're going through different things. I had a site walk on Tuesday, it was a scheduled site walk with John Kuchar, who was acting as more of the zoning enforcement officer than the building inspector. Matt Stencil, who was the highway superintendent here in Sutton. Jeff Walsh, who's with Graves Engineering, our review engineer. Dave Petkauskas, who is our paving contractor with Amarillo Paving, and myself. We walked the site, determined what we're going to do with the different sections of road, what comes out before we pave, how we're doing different things. One of the items that came up was at some point the town's taken over this road. And if you recall down in Hunter's Court, after this was approved in 2011, we purchased some land that was on the right-hand side that made the lot significantly bigger. Hence, we put the houses way back. The average driveway was somewhere around 25 feet long. They're now probably 75-plus feet long. So Matt brought it up when we were down there that there are 4 parking spots out there on the street that are cut into the front of lots. And he didn't want to maintain them, and he asked us to eliminate those. And, Jeff Walsh didn't have an issue with it. I believe he wrote a letter in favor of eliminating them, or, not so much in favor, but was not opposed to them. Did Matt Stencil write you a letter yet?
He did not. I'm aware of his thoughts on it. If I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, there was a home, and I totally think this is a great idea, not that I have a vote, but wasn't the homeowners association supposed to take care of maintenance of the overflow parking?
No, because these are located in the, I don't believe so. What came up,
I thought that they were.
what my understanding was they had to take care of the detention ponds. And I don't believe, because it's on town-owned land, I guess I'm not, I'd have to go back and read.
I'm just thinking ahead for when we when you move forward with the homeowners association, we should probably look at that to find out what exactly, I can go back in the minutes. But,
I don't recall that part, but it was clear the other day that everybody knew that the town would have to be responsible for plowing these spots.
John, do me a favor, could you just open up the plans?
Sure.
Just show the rest of the board members. Thank you, Lynn.
So these extra
Thank you.
spots
So
are,
what I think Lynn was saying was, just there's also in addition to once the town takes the road over, there's still there's some
the
responsibilities
mailboxes,
See this
there
letter?
was the
Yep.
overflow parking.
Yep.
Um,
that would have
But I will
gone on.
look, he could be right, but that's not what I remember. So I will go back in the minutes and find out.
In terms of
I
the town's
wasn't prepared for that
responsibility
question,
for
but
the
Well, for me, let's just look at the spots and see,
Yeah.
like, do they make
There's a
sense or
drawing.
not? I
There's a
mean, let's
drawing
make,
of the letter.
And
Yeah, you know, I know,
not
but
gonna-
he's
I
probably got a
totally
blown- do you have a
agree with
blown up-
Longer driveways, they're not necessary in this area.
so
Yeah.
these spots are excess parking because the original driveways are short. Is there other excess
sorry, you guys,
parking
right.
near
You
the
have
short
smallest,
ones?
I'm sorry.
On the other side of
I
the.
wanna make
The
sure
other side?
everybody could
So there
see.
is some excess parking already nearer to the
And all
short
of the,
driveways.
What it was-
I'm sorry, John, all of the driveways have the turnaround that's depicted, so that would give each home extra parking, right?
well, they
the-
don't. What's happening, I'm assuming that you're looking at a layout of Hunter's Court right now, some of the homes that are on there. Yes, that's the one. And where it's highlighted in yellow, those are 2 parking spots on the right and 2 on the left. And when we were going through the approval, the concern was the density down here, that there wasn't enough parking if there were people over there. But at the time, if you look at that solid line that's out there, we purchased probably, I forget from what it's labeled as Rochelo, Lewis, about 5 acres, and it made all those lots significantly bigger in their driveways. They're about 75 feet long now. So what turned out, so the theory was that they don't need the parking. And when we went through it, also, if you notice, like in the center of that cul-de-sac, it said snow storage area. They didn't want that. The highway superintendent, who was the same, he wanted that eliminated and wanted it all paved. And we did that also. And, this came up yesterday, and I'm sorry, Tuesday, and I said, I'll do whatever you'd like. And it
So the
was,
snow store, one more time, you said the snow storage areas now,
That's going away.
oh, in the center, okay, that's paved now.
yeah, it's paved now. The reason it was snow storage is what's not in there, if you notice, is almost like in the center, like a big circle. It was somewhat of a detention pond for collecting water, and they were just going to dump the snow in there. But he feels that there's ample room to put the snow down there. And,
All right, well,
but asked
so we
us,
have a circle and it shows a tree. And now you're saying that's asphalt?
That's all
correct.
getting paved.
They
You're making
want that to
bigger,
be
right?
where they plow and try to push the snow into the middle?
uh,
We're gonna eliminate all the snow storage areas? No.
no.
Just the 2 parking spots.
No, what's not depicted on that plan is that on what's probably lots 27, 28, and 26 is the front of those are snow storage areas. One of the, if you were to actually down there, we discussed it with them, if you were to look at the solid line, like in front of lot 26, you see where it says S?
Yep.
That solid line is actually, well, it's somewhat of a double solid line is the curbing. But if you look in there about approximately an inch going towards lot 26, see the solid dashed line that goes around all those? That's actually the town's right-of-way. So they can store snow up onto there. So this is actually what's paved. That's the curbing right there. But the town owns this 1 inch, and that's approximately, I think, 30 feet.
I see.
And he feels there's ample room to put the snow in there. And is,
So the other excess parking spots it must be over this far somewhere.
well, they are. What we ended up doing, it wasn't on the initial, I don't know if you need to be talking into this. It was not on the initial plan, was when we did the, actually, I don't know, I take that back. I think it was on the plan, but we have 4 parking spots up near the mailboxes. And then we have some more that's, okay, so right here, we have 4 parking
I see,
spots plus mailboxes. And then back up in here, there's 2 more spots.
Okay.
But these are all very short driveways,
Yes, yeah, I see that.
and they could never really park more cars.
Okay.
Is there a requirement to have this overflow parking? like, do they need to put it somewhere else, or they're just gonna put it in, you know, the people are parking in driveways, is that?
Just 'cause I've had a lot of trips up here over all the different walls and site visits, and John's been just an ongoing project trying to finish up.
We're getting
It
close.
was substantially small, I don't know, like that big heavy line, when this originally came, the houses were, so you know, a radius, the further you go out, the further everything gets away, well,
Yep.
before, it was this. So there was no place for parking, so now, when you do this,
It spans it
it's
all.
just, who's gonna park 200 feet from their house? Oh, I mean, that's exaggerated, but, I feel, is there any more discussion? I just think to eliminate these spots is pretty cut and dry.
Pretty easy, I think, yeah.
I don't wanna make John have to fumble through plans anymore. As far as I'm concerned, I'm good with it. I think it makes sense. It came recommended from the highway department and, also our zoning enforcer and the building inspector.
Yeah.
Therefore, I'm good. Is there any more discussion?
Do you wanna take a vote or formally to eliminate them?
That motion that I.
Yeah. I'll make a motion, that the Leland Hill Estates, motion will be to remove the 4 overflow parking spaces as requested and as identified on Plan Sheet 17 of the Approval Comprehensive Permit Definitive Subdivision Plan dated June 3rd, 2010, and revised on the Topographical and Utility Plan Sheet 1 of 1 dated August 20th, 2015, titled Leland Hill Estates Modification Plan in the Town of Sutton, Massachusetts.
On Hunter Court.
On Hunter Court.
I second that motion.
All those in favor? The ayes have it.
Thank you.
All right, John,
If you'd like,
thanks.
while I'm here, just in case people ask you, I'll give you a 1-minute update on what's happening there. And that,
Yeah,
like I
sure.
mentioned, we walked the road with everybody, because the road's been there for a while without top coat. We all agreed what sections would come out and what we would do with all the different structures. And right now, the selectmen approved the streetlights. I thought we were paying for the streetlights and I could put them in. And it turns out, when I went through the process, National Grid actually gives the lights, but you have to do them to their specs. And so I went to the selectmen, because the selectmen had to write a letter stating that after the roads are accepted, that they would pay for the power to,
Oh.
power the lights.
Yeah.
So we got that, so now I'm just waiting, and we would pave the road sooner rather than later, but I don't want to cut the road because we don't know where I believe I know where the power source is coming from, but I don't want to assume that and then have to cut the road. So I would think that we'd have it probably in about a month, and then we're going to put the streetlights in, and we plan to pave all the way down to just before Hunter's Court. We'll be raising all the structures and so forth, and then we had to add some drainage onto Hunter's Court. We did this in conjunction with Jeff Walsh, who was a flat spot, so we're in the process of adding 2 more drainage structures. That'll be done by probably Monday, and then we pave it. We have, the last foundation is going in on next week sometime, and then we'll be backfilling. 3 of those are affordables. We just had to do another lottery down there because there's certain time limits that we have to go back and do them. So we hire somebody, they did the lottery. The applications were due May 1st, and they're doing the drawing for the lottery winners on the 17th. We know that we have 2 of the 3 people that qualify for it. Qualify meaning they can get the financing and they can meet the income guidelines. So if that happens, then we will probably be out of there by the end of the summer. And we're putting in the granite curbing and the sidewalks on Hunter's Court, where, other than repairs, we're pretty much done and up to Hunter's Court. So the plan would be to finish it by the end of the summer, do the as-built plans, do the bounds and everything, and Jeff Walsh would review everything, and then we'd go to town meeting next spring for road acceptance. That's it in a nutshell, just in case somebody asks you.
How many
Thanks for the
permits
update.
do you have left open? I mean, I should know this, but the board may.
Building
not know.
permits?
Yeah, you're pretty much, well,
Yeah, we don't have to, the good news is we don't have to file for any more. They're all out there. There's one,
I should say unsold.
well, to me, sold means they have the deed in their name and the money's in the bank. So we use under agreement. So we only have the 3 affordables and 3 more market rates to sell. And we have put those in as specs. Right now we're building them so that we can do the sidewalks and do the looming and the seating and the grading and everything, because there's only so much that we can do down there with the lots. So we're close. I mean, I can see the goal line.
Just a question, just
Yes.
so we know what's coming in front of us. So before road completion, close out the bond.
Yes.
Would be one last time you'd come in front of us. How
I
does
think
that
it'll-
all work on this one?
I think it's probably gonna be maybe 2 times in front of you, because the bond is somewhere in the area of 300 and something thousand, just round numbers. And what we'll probably do is, after we do all the, down to Hunter's Court, come in and get that reduced, and possibly again on Hunter's Court, because there's a long period of time between when we do the work and then Jeff goes out and inspects it. And I know how Jeff is, he will go back out and look at things again and do another, okay, did we miss anything? Is this okay? Is that okay? And
So what's in place, John, from the time, is there an association already there in place and road maintenance between now and, we're gonna assume acceptance at town meeting, but what would be in place if we reduce the bond all the way down that assures the town that this will get followed through with? Is there an association in the meantime that,
yeah,
it sounds like there's already something in place and it must address
there is, there's an,
period
as-
between, just explain, just so when you come in, it'll
well,
just be
there's
that
an
much easier.
association in place, and everybody has to pay $150 a year. We have never collected the $150 because we were in there. It would have been used to plow the roads. We would get a majority of the use out of that and so forth. But once we're in the process of leaving, people will have to start paying. We'll explain that to them, because, there's common areas that have to be maintained, like going over the bridge that people won't mow the grass. There's things like that they'll have to do. So it's $150 a year is what the fee
So you're
is.
gonna start that process sooner than later then, I would guess.
Well,
if
it's
you're telling
already
us.
established. We just haven't collected the,
So we should give a heads up to well, I believe one of the responsibilities of the developer is to kind of make sure that the homeowners are left in a way that, right?
yeah.
So-
Well, they know it when they,
No, I know, but let's,
when they bought the place, it's in their deed that it's part of the homeowners association. It just, the only thing is, there's people in there that would have paid 6 years and would have said, what did I get for it?
John, I'm just saying, it's time, I think that we just, in my opinion, when you come before me for a final bond reduction on a road that isn't accepted by the town, I just wanna know that there's something in place that guarantees us as the townspeople that there's the maintenance plans, they're up and running, they charge their fees, cause they'll start to inquire cost, I would imagine.
The system's working,
Yeah, that the system's working, and then,
But the homeowners association isn't gonna take responsibility for incomplete or defective offsites, right? I mean,
well,
that's
Jeff
not-
Walsh, the town's engineer that we hire, will give us reports that the work's done and completed. We can always do site visits, so it wouldn't be unheard of, just either, usually a town planner would do it, I guess. They do a final walk on a project and just, you also have the engineer signs off, so we don't have a town planner. I guess we could do a final site visit when John says he's completely done. I've been a couple times, it is a beautiful project, I'm sure. Once he's spit, shine, and polished, Jeff Walsh gives it their approval, we could do like a final site visit, just make sure that association is just up and running, everybody's aware, is there a board, there must have to be some people in place that are gonna run it.
Yes.
So just let's make sure those things are done, that's all. So we can be done this summer, I'm all for being done.
Does the board get a copy of that, or the policy, the homeowners association policy, so that they know what they're gonna be responsible and what the town's not gonna be responsible? Will we get a copy of that?
If you'd like, sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
Like I
think
said,
that's a
just
good
close it to
idea,
it,
so
right?
that
Just-
the town's aware.
I want you to be done in
Yeah,
the
and-
midsummer when you come.
And just so,
Procedurally, how does bond reduction, I've never been through bond reduction and bond return, how does that,
I'll
how is
speak, because I
that?
think I'm the only one.
Yeah, right.
Rich,
If you
you
could-
too, right? You've been through a
Yes.
lot of this with us. He certainly has. I guess we, in the past, the town's engineer will go out, he's doing also inspections the whole time that John, his company is out there building. He gives reports back that tells us that all the work's been done properly. Once again, usually there's a town planner that would be reviewing all this and giving advice. Jen has weighed in on this a
She
little bit.
has, but she usually kicks it over to us, because actually it's this board who's responsible for
So
So
we
the
can-
engineer for the town, are they paid by the town?
No, they're paid by John. John wishes the town paid.
we put money into an
So,
account.
but the engineer's engagement is to act on behalf of the town. They're
Right.
just compensated,
Right.
okay.
And John has his own engineer on top of that engineer.
And then does the engineer make a recommendation to us for a bond reduction? Is that part of?
Yes.
Usually he does,
What
yes.
happens when he asks for a bond reduction, our engineer will go out there and look at the property and sort of take a look, well, yeah, it's gonna take this much money to finish this part, or more money for this. So we'll get sort of an idea what's left that needs to be done. And from those recommendations, we'll see if it works, and it has.
Yeah.
It's-
And then the final return of bond, what's the trigger? Is there something somewhere within some place that says what the trigger for that is? Is that acceptance of the road by the town, or what typically, is there a typical?
It's
or
when
is
the
there-
work is done, and I'll try and answer the question by working backwards, is that we have to go out there and, these plans were approved. So now what we have to do is get an as-built plan and show everything that was actually constructed and how does it vary from what was approved. And Jeff will look at that because there were some variations that we had to make with some drainage structures and things like that. And he's gonna make recommendations to the board like, hey, I don't agree with this change, I think this change is good, or what have you. And then we have that period of time to maybe make the corrections on it. There's really none that I know of other than some drainage that we did. And that was the purpose of the site walk the other day, to go over all that.
So the engineer that has a fiduciary responsibility to the town goes out, talks to you and your engineers, understands what may be required for the project to go through the process of final acceptance. They make a recommendation based on their estimated cost to complete for the punch list or whatever, to keep whatever amount of bond in force or none if everything's done. And so we've got
Pretty much.
a sort of, okay.
Just one more thing. Newer members that haven't been through the whole process. When we do our final walk, you're gonna see some pretty extensive retaining walls with we call it a bridge. I mean, there's no,
Nothing goes under, but yeah.
correct. And there was some question, it was built prior to John taking over the project, and we have put him through some pretty extensive engineering, documentation, inspections, so that if the town, and it got accepted at town meeting, and it becomes the town's responsibility. I mean, all roadways break down over time, but we at least made sure, because it had not been inspected. Some of this roadway, prior to John buying it, didn't go through the process we just described. It was originally started as a more private 55 and older community type project. So it didn't have the same stipulations as if it wasn't intended originally to be a town project. Bad times. Thank God John bought it. It's brought a nice project, affordable housing. It has done a lot of good things. I mean, cluster housing, so it's low impact, high development, like it followed a lot. It had affordable housing. It went through a scrutiny of planning board prior to John getting it. So just so the board knows that hasn't been involved, and we do that final walkthrough, anything you see, we've pretty much scrutinized over the last 4 years.
Yes.
We have.
Monitoring on that wall?
Oh, yes. Yeah, in fact,
I haven't
we're-
received anything in a while. Can you get me the latest?
And I was
so
just
can
gonna
put
say,
it
I
in the
thought-
file?
about 2 years old, and we, yesterday, we brought it up with John, and John said he is satisfied with it, you know, when we went through
Okay,
everything.
You can just send me a copy of
Sure.
the latest so I can stick it with the file,
Are
that's
these
fine.
septics or are they?
I was gonna ask, just to make sure, because we wanted a lot of documentation over, and I was just gonna say to John, make sure that everything with that wall is, everybody's on the same, just wanna get you through it, so we don't have, because those would be the only questions. The homeowner association up and running, make sure that there's a board of directors that are running the thing, and, you know, if it's a good roadway, I'm sure the townspeople, it's always it's better, it's town tax-paying people that, you know, you gotta let them have roads,
Now,
we can't
the
decide.
one
When we-
last question I have,
Yeah.
which is pretty much not related, but just for future for the board, if, people come in for special permits, variances, or whatever, are you gonna put boundaries out by the road or the markings for the properties?
Yes, it was required that we put bounds, concrete bounds out at the front and iron pins in the rear, with the exception that if the rear was out in a wetland and we couldn't put it there, we'd put it the closest part to there. You know, so yes, and that's part of the as-built plan that will be reviewed, that we have to put in there. We're gonna actually start doing those now that I think the good weather's here. And one other thing to answer your question is that before we can, to get the road accepted, we have to get everything pretty much done, virtually 100%, and then it goes in front of the selectmen, and they have public hearings where they agree to put it on the warrant for the annual town meeting. Unless they agree to put it on the warrant, we can't get on town meeting agenda. So there's a number of safeguards before we get to that point.
Does the subdivision bond get replaced by a maintenance bond? Is there another bond that follows up the?
No, It's just everybody's agreed that it's done, and
The association I'm talking about, somebody has to be responsible.
Yeah.
And the way it's worded now, and it's in their deeds, I believe, that they all knew when they bought in there that there would be a period that they were responsible before it got accepted. That's why, at that point, usually the towns accept them. I mean, they're done, it's gone through, it's all inspected, it was built correctly, can't speak for what happens, but usually the selectmen, these are tax-paying people that shouldn't have to pay maintenance on their road. It's not, we all get it, they should too. And that's just an opinion.
Yeah, I've just, in
You
my
just- yeah.
prior experience, there's usually been some sort of an instrument that follows the subdivision bond, so if there's an issue that develops a sinkhole or a drain that's not functioning properly or something, there's
So what-
some recourse against somebody.
So what the motivation for this association is gonna be? The cost is gonna go away once it's accepted, so the process will be, they'll do a final inspection of the road before it goes to town warrant. John will be gone, the association will be responsible now. And if there's problems with the road, they will probably not recommend for it to get accepted as a town road. Then the association will probably pay for whatever minor cosmetic
We would
blemishes
end up
might have
paying
happened
for it.
from John's responsibility, because the motivation to get this accepted will be so big.
Yeah.
That's why to me, that association is gonna be the key tool that just makes this all work.
Yeah.
As an
The association is, how many members are there?
well, there's 52 homeowners, but we'll end up doing all the
So
work.
they're gonna be funded initially with about $5,000.
Yeah.
So $5,000 doesn't solve a lot of problems.
Remember when I said you better get that association up and running with a pocketbook before?
Before the.
But see, they'll
any-
take over no liabilities because we will be taking care of everything.
Right, yeah, they just have to maintain it.
Yeah.
There's detention ponds, correct?
The detention ponds, I think that's basically, and then some of the common areas that, you go through a development, you cut the grass strip between your house and the sidewalk, and this person doesn't, so it's
Which
meant,
is what I think those overflow parking is part of, that's part of the common area.
yes.
So, that's why I said, I believe the association is responsible for that. They don't wanna plow them, they don't have to plow them.
Well, plowing and
Yeah.
cutting grass isn't the issue, right? It's if there's an inherent issue, or there's some engineering issues, or there's a sinkhole or soil conditions that develop after the project is completed that, you.
I think we're in pretty good shape on that because it would have occurred by now. I mean, it's been in there for a while. It started in, we believe they paved it in '07. And we've done a number of testings and so forth. We've taken up sections of road because, as Mike mentioned, it was a 55 and over with different building setups. We had to take out a lot of sections of road to put in sewer that didn't exist and didn't service it. And during that process, they were able to get a good feel for what was the gravel base, what was everything. That was all discussed yesterday, with like John and Jeff and Matt Stencil, and so we're all pretty comfortable with it. And I don't expect anything like that to happen.
Well, the engineer, that would be something they'd look into, right? The engineer that works for the town would make sure that.
Jamie, just as an opinion, Jeff Walsh has probably worked for most of these surrounding towns, good part of 20 years. I personally have had to, have him inspect, very thorough gentleman. His firm is extremely reputable. I can assure you, not that no one's gonna guarantee a sinkhole, he doesn't stand there all day, all long, but he is usually present during some components of construction that if it wasn't done properly, it would fail, and he's usually actually has to be on it's pretty extensive. If you went through all the reports from since John's taken it over to today, and you may wanna just breeze through it, cause you understand it as well. No, it's
I'm just
important,
kinda
this is a
curious.
big
I'm
thing.
I'm sorry
Yeah.
if I'm using you as a learning exercise for how our surety bond process works. 'Cause
And I just
it's-
want it to be
I'm
easier for John when you
unfamiliar with it,
come
but
and we,
right.
got new aboard and all of a sudden they, see and walk the project or
it's-
drive through for their first time and start to go, wow, this is, it's a good sized property, it's some big roadways and it's got some, but
Essentially, we fund an account with the town, and Jeff has carte blanche to go out and do the inspections as he sees, and he bills the town, and I think Lynn is the one that pays
I
him.
just paid them.
yeah.
And when it gets to a certain point, when it gets low, hopefully it's not getting low, Lynn lets me know we have to replenish the account, and it's like no ticket, no laundry. If we don't put money in the account, he won't do inspections. If he doesn't do inspections, we can't continue. So,
So, yeah, they'll never get it accepted as a town road, because without Jeff Walsh's recommendation, I don't think there's a town that would accept, that'll kill it,
Yeah, if I
can't
remember
speak for
correctly,
townspeople,
at the
but
very
usually if you-
beginning, when John took over this project, there was, there were systems already in place for sewer and water, and he had to go through the expense of having it cambered, if I remember
Yes.
correctly, to make sure that everything was still in a working order, because the developer prior to him did not do such a good job.
Oh, wow.
So,
My experience in bonding is that, and it's part of the premium structure that you pay, having been on the other side of it, that normally, most municipalities, and you can speak to this, when they release the actual subdivision bond, require that some small penal sum instrument for the purpose of maintenance and correction of defaults is put in place. Significantly smaller balance than what the original bond was required, but doesn't cost you anything to get it, it doesn't, right, it's not a.
We haven't had that. I can tell you in the interest of fair disclosure that with Jeff Walsh, 2-3 years ago, I finished a 200-unit condo development with him, no issues. Actually, I didn't finish with him. Town went with a lower price person. I wish they finished it with Jeff, which was even
Get what you pay for,
harder.
right?
But Jeff was in there for probably 8 of the 9 years when we were in there. And we've done others with him. He's very thorough. We have the villas as well, and down here off of Boston Road, and Jeff's the engineer in there. He's wonderful to work with. I call him up or email and say, here's what they're doing, and just go by when you go by. I'm not there. He has carte blanche to just look at whatever it is. If there's any issue, he lets them know. It's a good system. So I just wanted to update you for a minute. I guess it turned into 15 minutes, but
John, time well spent, I'm telling you, when you come back,
well, at least you know. So
we all know.
You must be glad to be reaching the horizon of the project, right? It's time to,
it's like a habit, you know. Yes, but we just started another 96 units, and we're buying another 124 units and another 80. So it's kind of,
Anything in Sutton?
no,
Outside
no,
town.
no. And one's up at Rockingham Racetrack in Salem, New Hampshire. That's when we're doing 96 up there now. And we did part of Spags and another one over in Shrewsbury. And, you know, it's just, it kind of sounds like Bill Belichick, but it's like, who's next week? You know, as plain as it seems, it's like you get up and you do what you need to do. And maybe it's not that blunt, but it's, you know, we're hoping, I am happy this one's
you're
finished.
obviously very good at what you do and comfortable with it.
Well, yeah,
Places.
every day's a challenge.
No,
So-
it's true. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John, for the update.
Stay cool. Thank you.
Too late.
You've also kept another abutter happy throughout these years, too.
Not me. Done, you can't wait. Nah, didn't know.
Good night.
Thank you, Rick. See you, John. All right, we have a couple of work sessions to do.
Make a motion to open the work session on Damon Bigelow 29 Heritage Road, construction of a shed.
Second that.
All those in favor? Aye. Where did he go? So the applicant is just seeking special permit to build a new shed,
There were a picture somewhere, I lost it. It's in here somewhere. It's
tear down his old one. He's got a pre-existing, non-conforming shed.
no, I lost it.
Like to make it, his new shed, a little more conforming. Still non-conforming, but more conforming.
That's it. It's
Anyone like to make a motion?
What's that?
No more discussion.
Oh, we gotta make a motion.
Oh, right, yeah, and then we discuss it.
Second, then
Lot
discussion.
Yes.
This is the site plan or, no, site plan.
Did you wanna make a motion on it?
You wanna make a motion?
Make a motion to accept,
Grant,
to
special.
grant the special permit. I find it, hold on. You got it right there?
Yep.
I would just call it plot plan David Bigelow.
Yeah, you get the
So
plan.
this is, drawn by.
He's requesting a special permit.
I'll make a motion to accept the special permit as it pertains to IC2D of the town zoning bylaws for the construction of a shed. I will make a motion to approve it as plan dated.
Yeah, 4/2. 2018.
Yep,
The little one there.
4218 by Robert Murphy, and it's a plot plan for David Bigelow.
You got a second on that?
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Sure.
Discuss away.
Any conditions or anything?
I think the special permit is, I think the board has the authority to grant a special permit, when there's a hardship. And I don't see a hardship other than Mr. Bigelow doesn't want his shed too close to his deck. And if I own that property, I would say the same thing. I don't want my shed that close to my deck. I don't want that wasted space behind my shed. But that's not what the bylaw says. That's my discussion.
Any other discussion?
How many votes does it take to pass? These 4 with 6?
Takes 4, but don't get confused with hardship. Hardship is variances. Special permit, all he has to do is meet those
Where's your list?
requirements.
So let's dig that list out.
All right.
My list is.
Appropriateness of
I
the
have the
specific
list
site as a location.
right here, hold on.
Haven't had it tonight.
Had it been a variance, you're right on the nose.
Appropriateness, okay, so, certain uses, let's start with the special permit prologue. Certain uses, structures, or conditions are designed at special permit section 3, table of use regulations, blah, 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 blah. Upon, application duly made to the board may, in appropriate cases and subject to appropriate conditions and safeguards, grant a special permit for such uses, structures, and conditions and no others. Okay? A, acting upon application for special permit, the board shall take into consideration, 1, appropriateness of the specific site as a location for the use.
So it's his lawn, it's a shed, it's very close to the
Fence, yeah.
fence.
2, adequacy of public sewage and water.
In A.
3, effect of the developed use on the neighborhood. 4, whether there will be undue nuisance or serious hazards to vehicles or pedestrians. And 5, whether adequate appropriate facilities will be provided to ensure proper operation of the proposed use, structure, or condition.
Read the last one again?
Whether the adequate and appropriate facilities will be provided to ensure the proper operation of the proposed use, structure, or condition.
What does that one mean?
He's not gonna like abandon his shed and let it fall into disuse, right?
Well, let's make a condition, the other shed comes down. You
Right.
said right on, so
Yeah.
I think, you know,
Yeah, they said they were gonna take it down, let's make sure that's
well,
part
yeah,
of it.
let's make that a condition. Because one of the things for me was, is because he's got that existing shed that's even closer and.
Yeah.
Check the as-built too, because we wanna make sure, if we're to grant this, that it is indeed the 4 feet.
Yep.
So you put no closer than 4 feet on both
Well, the
setbacks?
plan,
Well, I mean, it
Just follow the
references,
plan,
it
yeah.
references the
follow the
plan, but
plan
if
on
you,
this one.
do we have that where it's checked to require an as-built?
I could just say, require an as-built maybe. Does it check?
Down,
There's a place to check.
right here, 7.
I think when you get the permit for the shed, would that get covered with the building permit and as-built plan? Would
Say
that be?
what?
So, he needs a building permit for the shed?
Mhm.
Would the as-built be covered, like, would you guys make sure that he meets the setbacks and to close out the
We
permit?
always, especially anything from this board, we always require. an
You
as-built.
require an as-built.
So it's good that it's a condition, yeah, check it, but
anyways,
it's gonna
but
get
all-
done at the level of the
right,
building
Getting
department, so.
doubled.
Yeah, just check to make sure
Yeah.
they know that's a condition
Yeah, I'd
too.
just like to make sure on that.
Yeah.
Really, just about anything we do should require it, because it usually, if they're moving something too close, we wanna make sure that that's where it went.
And make a note of the existing shed that's
Yeah,
Yep.
to be removed.
You know,
So
the
approve
exist-
special permit for construction of a shed as portrayed in plot plan, Damon Bigelow, contingent on the removal of existing shed. Sound good? And then I have under number 7, submit a foundation as-built plan to the building commissioner.
Okay.
So, he's not asking for a variance, so, doesn't matter, right?
Well, we could still say
meets-
this is
well,
too
he-
close,
he
If
yeah.
you
does-
find
meets
it's
the criteria.
detrimental, you can
Right.
note
Say
that
this has
you
a
find
negative
it's
effect.
detrimental.
It's in the
Right, So the
setbacks.
setback really doesn't matter anymore.
Setback.
I know where you were going with this, and I agree. Like,
Yeah,
in the
no,
sense to
I-
have a discussion that there's nothing sacred, so I think this is what you're thinking. and I'm
Sheds go
thinking it.
anywhere, right? A
Why
shed
to have
can-
zoning?
A shed can go anyplace.
Why have zoning?
I'll say it that simple,
Yeah, that's a good question.
because there's no,
That's why you as a board can make the determination what's
So we
pushing it too
We can
far.
shoot it down if we want. These are like the 5 ways we can shoot it down. Is another way
But
to
it
look
meets
at
all
Well-
five. It's not a variance for the zoning, it's not a variance for the setback, it's a special permit because he wants the shed,
We could
not
say,
near his deck, and it meets the 5.
placing something in a
criteria.
setback has a negative effect on the neighborhood, we could say.
I get the zoning argument, but I mean, his neighbors also came out or his neighbor, and is,
but I think Rich
The
is.
neighbor doesn't have the authority to change the zoning.
fair enough, fair.
It's the same way with me and Rich, we've been on it a while together and just zoning, and a lot of times it's an existing, and we're just trying to take a house and put the new house, but to just take a shed for, I think the struggle, right, is that there's nothing, like, I looked at the picture,
He just wants to
and
put
I
it in the
said,
setback.
so, and I asked about why 10, and he said it was 15 feet, I don't think it's that close, is it? I mean, we kinda scaled it.
No, it's on
I think it's
scale.
about 25,
Yeah, it's 25.
direct angular
Yeah.
distance.
It sets precedents that we're not paying attention to setbacks anymore.
You know, the thing that the thing that concerns me the most, right, and the thing that as I'm getting up to speed with understanding how the process works, is that having been on the development side of the business, before you purchase a house, a prudent buyer will get a set of the zoning bylaws if they have a non-conforming lot, or their realtor will help them, and they'll understand what they can do in the future within the window of acceptability to modify their house, add to it, all this kind of stuff. So, in situations where someone comes and says, I have a hardship, or something like this is necessary, unless they've owned the place until the bylaw that creates the hardship was established, I'd argue that they kind of don't. It's kind of a buyer beware situation. And I think that, you know, this is in terms of impact on the town and this
None.
is zero,
Right.
right? But it becomes a bigger situation with where do you draw the line? Right? Where is it, at what point do you say, should we create an amendment to the bylaw that waives setback requirements for sheds, or should we, I mean,
Well,
if
there's a
that's,
difference.
as a board, if we think that a shed is a low, it's a relatively low ridge building that doesn't have a huge visual impact, and maybe the setback requirement for sheds should be modified. I
Well,
don't
to
know.
answer your
They'd have to
question,
go
Jamie, where do
through
we
town
draw the
meeting, right?
line?
Yeah.
We draw the line,
Yeah.
right? We draw the line by saying, you can have your shed 4 feet off the fence when it's supposed to be 10 feet off the fence. We draw the line. And then the next person who comes in here next year says, well, I want mine 2 feet off, and I want an 18-foot shed.
And you know the problems we leave with this, and why 10 is a good number? So you have a fence, you have a shed, it's all mungled, now all of a sudden the neighbor wants to do the same thing, and now all of a sudden,
You end
who
up with a
can work
cluster
on
of
any of
sheds
their,
in the
well, who
back.
can work on any of their property? And all of a sudden, the neighbors change, and now I don't like you as my neighbor so much as the neighbor before you, and I don't want you anywhere near my property.
Yeah.
So now you can't even maintain your fence without taking the shed down.
Yeah.
For me, this is great discussion, but, so maybe we could also we could agree to the side, because one thing he has going for him right now, in my mind, is taking that shed down that's really close to the property line, that's more in the middle of the property. So maybe this is a chance for the board to maybe kind of meet him halfway and say, well, let's take the shed down. He's asking for a side and a back. Maybe tell him he's gotta stay the 10 on the back. Let him do the 6, which is actually further away from the property line. As we go through that checklist of 5 things, I guess we would maybe some kind of an approval like that, if we would even say yes to it at all, at least on paper, it would look like we left the lot less non-conforming than before it came in front of our board.
You know, in a situation.
Just a discussion, just a thought.
You know, I think that, he's asking for two things. He's asking for a waiver of a side setback and a waiver of a back setback.
Yeah.
It would be easier for me to consider if he was asking for one thing.
And I think I could lean in that direction as well if the shed was the same size. The shed's twice as big.
Yeah.
I mean, he's the neighborhood go-to guy for mowers, and so I'm sure he's got tools and parts and everything in
It's
there.
gonna be a busy shed.
And I just think at this point, we have to do it as a condition now. I think because it's a special permit, we'll have to use it as a condition that he has to meet the 10-foot back setback now that we've closed it to, if we were to agree to this. We'd have to say, one of the conditions would be he has to meet the back property setback. Correct, if we're granting a special permit and not
You
a
have the
variance
right
that's
to do that.
specific to
Yeah,
different
that's one of
things.
the-
Well, a special permit still, you
So I
still
think
need
what
to
a special-
special out you still need to spell out the dimensions, like we would do.
Oh, agreed.
So, I mean.
It sounds like the special permit that's gotten redone's given us a little more leeway, but also, let's always make sure that we don't create much more non-conformities.
If we just say
All I'm saying is I
no,
think you still need to-
right? Then how long until you can propose a different shed in a different location?
Next month. You
No,
just
it's
can't,
not
propose.
years.
No, you
Years.
can't, 2 years for the same thing.
Oh,
Same thing,
He could
right?
come in
Right,
next
right.
week
Oh,
and ask
right,
for a
right.
5-foot and
Different
5-foot instead
location,
of
right?
4.
Right.
I mean,
Right, he could
I
make
don't
it
think
5
we
and
need
5
to-
and come back
I
again.
don't think we need to problem solve like where he should put it to make it. You know, I think we should just say no. It's right in the setbacks. I mean, that's just my opinion. And then he can come back with a different location if he wants. You know, instead of us telling him exactly where to put it. It's like this one's.
the only
But
thing
if
with-
there's a dimension you're comfortable with, say
if we
say
do-
it's 10 feet you want and not 4, then we can say, this is what we've done in the past, like when we're on some of these lake things, when we make them smaller, we say,
Are we sure
Like
that
the
the
other one we
setback for
say-
sheds is different than the setback for?
Let's check this out because it does depict this on the map
when,
as
right, setback
20.
for sheds is
10
different.
feet.
It's 10 feet. Okay.
10 feet.
It is, it's 10.
Even from a front property line?
Halfway through that line, right?
50 from the front, okay, so 50 from the front, 10 from the sides and
In
rear.
that
So, Mike,
zoning
to-
district,
to
yeah.
clarify for you, pardon the language here,
Where's
but
10 feet? This is the
This-
setback,
So this
right?
is
Either of these is
20,
the back.
so it's halfway through here.
Oh,
So
okay.
actually where he drew this line,
Is
so we're talking about like,
like up here.
yeah. Oh man, I don't know what he's got on, going on back here. There's no windows here. You could like put a shed here, you know?
They consider, yeah, side,
like I
side
said,
and back is,
I don't know if we should problem solve it
So
for
this
him.
is, oh,
According to
yeah,
that,
no,
side and
I
side.
see what just, well,
in front.
but still pushing
Right,
it
in
forward
front.
gives more room, and then you got.
No, it's got
I don't
this,
wanna
this is
get
a
too
road, so there's
Oh,
another
okay.
50 here, yeah.
I was just
Yeah, I
simply
think- I
saying,
think
if you have an existing shed in the middle that's really close to the property line, it's probably not very good look, I'm just not gonna.
How wide is
Is
this
there-
lot?
100 feet,
Is there any way to tell,
oh, that's the
Wide?
like, how does
Oh,
he
this
have
one,
a shed that's only a foot off?
132,
Right
I think,
now,
at the
like-
back.
Pre-existing,
Pre-existing?
somebody probably built it years ago and just
It's
stuck
probably
it
just
up.
old.
So he could.
Long and long.
Like, I don't know how old
Wide
this
and
site
wide.
is
it's a
or
half
anything.
acre, it's a half acre lot,
take
it's a lot to
those
squeeze into a
over
half
here.
acre lot.
Which is, I think, and I think what he's trying to do is make as much usable space
For himself.
in the
yeah.
yard.
Yeah.
He's got kids, things like that. You know, and I think from my conversations in the office, the reason why he wanted to put it there is so it doesn't eat up that space.
Yeah, I'm sure that's the,
Of course. If that was my property, I'd do the same thing. I'd want to do the same thing, rather.
Then there's probably the guy that could just, but there's no, do you require, so you get a permit for a shed, is there an as-built that requires, that, they might have to show where they say they're gonna put it?
Not if it meets zoning.
John
we
just
don't
Right.
comes, right?
require it.
So if the intent that it's 10 feet from the property line, and if
If
it's
it's ever
not,
in
and then there's an
question,
issue,
If we've ever found where there's a shed, they wanna stick it right on that 10-foot, then we do ask for it.
oh, if it gets real close, and, yeah. These are all really good points to,
Mm-hmm.
once again, this is
So that's,
first for me on
the
something like this.
depicted setback line is not correct
Always
then,
something new, you know?
Right.
Everything's unique.
because that's 20.
That's
It's
20
unique.
feet.
Yeah, no,
So
you're
it's
right.
half of it.
Everything is unique. There isn't one that's the same, and it's not one, yeah, and one decision
what I-
doesn't, yeah.
That's probably the setbacks for the primary structure,
Right,
which would
right,
be the
not for
house.
the
That's
shed.
20.
Yeah, he kinda L'd it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with it either, your argument.
It's tough. I want the guy to have a shed. He
I
wants
would
a shed.
like the guy to have a shed too.
I mean, you know, you're talking, pushing it 6 feet and he's conforming.
And he doesn't need our approval. Doesn't need a
Yeah,
special
skips
permit.
us altogether.
The zoning bylaw is the zoning bylaw.
All right, well, we have a, motion and a second. Is there any more discussion?
No, sir.
All right, all those in favor
Of,
granting the special permit, because that's what the motion was. All those in,
Just a motion, everyone's still, it's just something to get it.
we haven't voted yet, so if anybody wanted to change the motion, or if we just choose to deny it, that's where we're at. So if anybody wants to make a new motion, we can, or we'll vote on the one that's on the
Conditions
table
if
right
we-
now.
I didn't, is there any more discussion of conditions, or, cause we
Did you
just had,
wanna do that before you do a final vote? Do you
Do
wanna
what?
make a condition with maybe,
Well, that's what I'm kinda asking, does anybody want, the motion right now is to grant the special permit as requested. So-
with one condition
The
that,
as-built.
With the
the as-built, tear down the existing shed. We started conversation of changing setbacks, Rich brought up, this is unique,
Right.
there is no back setback.
That's the point of the zoning.
So if we were to let him agree to do one and not the other, it didn't, it's a moot point, I think we are after depicting it, the plan.
So where's everybody sit?
But we have an
We're just gonna
existing
vote.
shed,
We have to vote, right?
so
I'm just
nobody
saying
wants
that
to
we're
do
gonna
anything
just-
else with
Right,
setbacks?
we're gonna just leave it as requested.
Is there a difference between voting no and then instead voting deny and then everyone voting yes? This is the same, right?
Right, because the motion
Yeah.
was made to grant it. If he had made the motion to deny it,
You'd be voting to deny it.
right, you'd be voting to deny it.
We can change the motion.
Can you?
Well, either way, it's the same thing.
Well,
once
right,
it-
you can,
Same result.
The intent,
Yeah.
yeah, that's why I
I
made a
might have to
motion.
refill out a form.
So as a board, we can make him follow the setbacks. I guess I kind of agree. Like, what's the point of having a setback if?
well, and I
If
don't,
we
I
say
think
no,
he
that's
doesn't.
what happens, it defaults back to that
Yeah.
10-foot setback.
He's, right.
He
Yeah.
could file, put a shed 10, you know.
I mean, it's kind of a, you don't want to deny a guy a shed, but you
You have
also
to
don't
keep-
want
We're
to.
just denying the
not
location.
to cut in, but you have to keep in mind, it's a non-conforming lot.
Mhm.
So that's part of the mix. It's smaller than your, current standards, which allows him to go for this. So,
And he's 6 feet outside of.
Is it
oh, it's-
half the
he
size of
needs
the-
6
No, I
feet,
think what
so-
Lynn's saying, so remember, when zoning was created, it was on an 80,000, in some parts of town, there's different parts, some are smaller. I know with sewer and water, how small do the lots get? Would they be closer in size to this?
well, you're talking most of the town
Is 80,000
is
square feet,
80,000 square feet.
250 feet of frontage.
Yeah.
So a 10-foot setback is almost moot. So one of the hardships that stimulates him to ask for relief more than just one of your,
Let's go a
the
half.
lot was
half acre.
created prior to zoning.
Mhm.
He's got a smaller lot than all of us. The zoning was required for bigger lots.
Yeah.
I just think Lynn just wanted us to, because there's so much
I
to
just want you
this.
to know
Yeah.
And then
all
when
of
we
it
say no to something,
before.
he's asking because his lot's very small. He has an existing shed.
It's like you said, he doesn't want a little 10-foot piece of
So
grass
he
behind
had
it
had-
he's never
when
gonna use.
existing
let's ask-
nonconformities are measured the same way, whether it's a
Bigger, smaller, but
non-conforming
let's say
lot,
it this way,
there's
John
not a
Burns, we just
separate-
had some discussion about a neighborhood that's very tight together.
Yeah.
That all the I think Lynn said, what's gonna happen when they start asking to want to put sheds on so
It's a good question.
on I don't wanna say negative side, but on another note, we're gonna have a whole bunch of these that could start to come in front of us, and if we allow, let's call it 0 lot lines, cause technically, if we don't follow
Yeah,
zoning
you're
for
creating a precedent.
conversation,
Yeah.
that's what we're saying, 0
creating a
lot
precedent.
lines.
We don't
Just-
really on the board technically,
But
because
Because every case is
Right.
considered unique, yeah.
you can argue it.
And the
but
uniqueness of
each
this
is
one,
unique.
that's, I think the struggle when we saw a picture of a beautiful grass yard with no encumbrances from pulling this over a little bit.
Yeah, it's not like there's like rocks, can't put it there, you know, yeah.
Or a septic's, I
Yeah,
thought maybe his
septic,
leaching
yeah.
field was in the way, or.
But we don't know, I mean, it's not really,
Well, I asked him
not
the
sure where.
question, and he said that it was under,
He thinks it's
it
shed.
was
It's
under
in
the
the
existing
backyard,
shed,
yeah.
But we have a non-conforming existing lot with an existing shed that's 2 feet off the property line that will go away. So back to just a
Yeah.
positive thing that gets cleaned
Yeah.
up.
It's a tough one.
It's a tough one.
So if he keeps the shed the same size as the shed that's being raised, the shed that he's building, if he keeps it the same size, he'll be roughly the same distance from his deck if he's conforming to the setback.
That's another.
That's true.
That's maybe, yep,
Yeah.
good point.
I mean, an argument that maybe I could have bitten onto is like, this is half an acre, and so the 10-foot setback's for an acre, so how about I get 5 for a half-size lot, But still, it's less than that, it's 4. Again, I don't know if we need to problem solve it for him,
So you have sewer and water in this part, where is?
No.
No? So that's,
Well, and something.
so this is in an area that would be 250 feet of frontage and 80,000 square feet or bigger. So everything around it that's been created since zoning. He didn't even talk about the surrounding lots and how big they were and,
They're all similar
They're
size,
all
the
the
neighborhood
same.
is all the
Yeah.
same.
It's all the same.
so it all leads to.
And I don't know, I haven't been through the neighborhood to see if people have sheds stacked up in the back corners of their houses or what.
Well, I guess
kinda
another
is.
reason,
sure they do.
another reason could be he's the only one with a small lot, all these big, so if he went close to the property line, nobody else would be so encroached upon, but if it's pretty
pretty similar.
consistent. So another thing, cause he's on 2 sides, I guess,
Corner, too.
it makes it worse.
He's got a
because-
neighbor on both sides, definitely.
Yeah,
Right now, it's only close to this guy, but it'd be close over here too.
yeah, right, so, wow, really tough one. I'm good, no more conditions as far as I'm concerned. I just think you're correct, that we're trying too much to create the wheel.
I think you gotta respect the setback.
Yep. And if we try to brainstorm something that we're trying to convince ourselves of that we're okay with, right, is that,
I mean, he might just not even want our solution, I'll just build a smaller.
Well, like you said, yeah, we don't need
Yeah,
to make it,
correct.
right, we
Yep.
don't have to give them the answer.
Yeah.
Any more discussion? All right. We have a motion to grant a special permit. All those in favor, say aye. All those opposed?
No.
Aye.
aye.
Oh, you say aye for the?
You can say aye for all of them.
Aye.
Unanimous on the opposal. All right, next up, we have 38 Horn Drive. I'll entertain a motion to open a work session on 38 Horn Drive.
I'll make a motion to open the work session on 38 Horn Drive.
Second on that? All those in favor? Aye. All right, the applicant is requesting a special permit as it pertains to 1C, 2D, of the zoning bylaws to construct a garage, where both lot and structure are pre-existing, non-conforming in nature. I'll entertain a motion on that. Don't everybody speak at once.
This is another special permit.
We have another one to sign for that, Dave?
Oh, is there another sheet too? Oh.
only because you
Yeah,
had that
assistant clerk
wonderful,
has it.
just, I don't know if we have to read the whole thing again, but at least the checklist.
Promoted you already, yeah?
Now, you're the checklist.
I didn't bring my laminated checklist, so.
By the way, I
we
think that
signed
you
it.
pocketed my
He's got it.
laminated version of the
Does he
checklist
have
too,
the
but
laminated?
we'll save that for another day.
These guys, you want
I just lost my pen.
Yeah, can we borrow 'em? Mike wants to read it.
Careful of that
Oh,
guy,
wait,
right?
Probably gotta sign.
I don't think I have another
You got the
signing
cheat
sheet,
sheet
though.
for you, Mike.
There it is, all right. so
All
you're up.
right.
So we have, is someone gonna make a motion, or?
So it's a special permit. Somebody else make the motion.
Rich?
There's another sheet that goes.
So you wanna do it?
I don't
Rich should
have
do it.
that. I might not get a second. I'm gonna make a motion to deny this one.
Okay,
Second that, how's that?
all right,
All those in favor?
let's have
Aye.
some discussion.
Well, let's have
Oh,
some
yeah.
discussion.
Jeez,
Right,
you wanna
right.
talk
No,
about
no,
it?
no, I meant, yeah, to talk about it.
I mean, this is another really complicated one that's tough for me, you know? And I just think, like, maybe what I've decided at the end here is not every lot can accommodate an attached two-car garage, you know? Like, it's just, and it's in an awful spot in this property. So I don't know if that means he should try to build a detached garage. Again, I don't know what the solution is, but this is very big, and it's in the setback.
It is very big. And I think Jamie said it's the only,
It's the only side it is
it's the
conforming.
only
on.
conforming lot line.
Yeah.
And he's taking that away, and, you know, I still come back to special permit or variance, does it really matter, because what we're doing is we're just waiving zoning,
Yeah.
so someone can have a nice big garage.
Right, and I always have that hard time with a garage.
It's not a garage, though. A third of the square footage is a garage. It's a
Right.
master bedroom addition.
Right.
The more square footage is the master bedroom.
You know, when we have these tear downs on the lake, and it's a much smaller lot, and there's nothing you can really do with it except tear it down and rebuild it, and it's still gonna be non-conforming, that's one thing. Like you said, when you're adding on,
He's adding a house to the house.
It's like
I mean,
almost
it's
the
big.
same size, right? Yeah, it's big. And you know, sometimes we grant those garages. Like I said, people are parking on the street, like that one we did that site visit on,
Right.
like last year. You know, it's like you do really need a garage, so you're not stepping out into traffic. You know, like this is the end of a road. It's got a place to park. You know, it's like I understand the desire to have a nice big house, but maybe this isn't a lot for it. You know.
or this isn't the design for it.
Isn't the design for it, right? Again, I don't know what the solution is too, but
Right,
I
we
also
don't
see
have
a
to
lot
make
of
a
a lot of
solution.
green on
Right,
there, you know, yeah, like a lot of open
So I
land.
could be wrong, but if he pushes it forward, I mean, he had a lot of view through here.
Yeah.
We're not gonna design it for him, but he has other options, right? I think that's kind of what we're all saying.
Right.
I think I tried to lead him down a road. Sometimes as a board, we can't make people do things, but I had lots of discussion about a smaller project. We've had better reception in the past
Yeah.
of that discussion. He seemed pretty adamant that.
Yep.
So I gave him
Sometimes they-
opportunity for discussion for a smaller project, and he just seemed like he wanted us to put this particular one to vote. Because that's what I guess what happens. Either you can ask the board to withdraw if you feel as though, you know, like you asked for something that's not. And then in the past, we have discussion about the ideas of something smaller. Just so consistency for you guys that, you know, we always try to talk through a project.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel there was any.
I
tried to-
agree with you, you're saying,
garage,
Mike.
yeah.
We've had projects similar to this where we say, wow, this is really big, and then the applicant said, well,
Give me a
Let's
month.
work
what
on
if,
it. I'll be back
what if
next
I
month.
cut it in
And they
half?
come back next month and they
Right,
have a
what if I
whole.
cut it in half, you know, and like you said, he seemed to be set, like,
I think one
I
thing
mean,
we
if
can
that's
do
what he
as a
wants to
board,
build,
instead
then
of
that's
just saying no, we can, they have to ask for that though, correct?
You've closed the hearing now,
Closed
so.
it now.
So you have to deny it,
Had
right?
you, within the hearing, said, what if we continue it, and maybe you can come back with something smaller, like the way you were talking
Yeah,
about?
yeah.
Shifting it down to a 24 by 24 garage? That would have been the opportunity.
What we wanna lead is,
but once again,
is that something that, see, it's hard to have discussion to tell somebody what to do that
Right.
Yeah.
6 people feel comfortable about.
The one thing that I'm particularly sensitive about on lake lots, because I'm an aesthetics guy, isn't just the view from the abutters, but the users of the lake
What's
is,
it look like from a boat?
is the silent, is the silent abutter, right? And one of the things that makes Lake Singletary so special is that, you know, I mean, his house would stretch from within 10 feet to 10 feet of his property lines. As you cruise around Lake Singletary, I don't think anybody really wants to see what appears to be a continuous house around the perimeter of the lake. You know, it's
And we've had
that's a
quite
gross exaggeration, right? But I mean, it's
And we've had a lot of properties, so, you know what, another scenario that just came to me, and I think of all these lake properties, and I'll use the words 50 feet, probably most of them, and they find a way to design a house, a garage, and a much narrower footprint. So, I guess if that might be some challenges he has ahead of him, that he wouldn't have to, I guess maybe he'd be coming in front of the board for maybe just a variance for the size of the adding to the nonconformity on a
yeah, right.
It's not, it'd still be within the lot coverage, it'd still be within all the setbacks. So I guess there's plenty of things that he could still accomplish.
I think there are, Mike. I mean,
Yeah, no, the more, I mean,
you know, you do a
think of-
garage and a half, you're within the setback, you're still over the 30% increase, but you're
Over
within,
double,
you're well within that setback, and that's important because, you know, without zoning, we can do whatever we want, and if we just grant special permit for everything that everybody wants, then we don't have zoning. So I'm pretty firm in that position, as you guys all know.
So what I would do is when you go to the 4 or the 5 conditions that you have to meet, go through them, and you're gonna have to identify which ones he meets and which ones he doesn't
where they go.
want.
I'll do it, I'll go through 'em. Do you wanna do it, or you?
Because
I'll
that
go
will
through 'em.
be in the decision.
You like it.
Wait, let me, hold on, before
Yeah,
we,
absolutely.
before
You
we
go.
read
Take
the
your time.
5,
Take your
right,
time.
before we read the 5.
Yep.
Where is the 5? Okay, special permit. Certain uses, structures, or conditions are designated as special permit in Section 3, Table of Use Regulations, and elsewhere in the bylaws. Upon application duly made to the board may, in appropriate cases, and subject to the appropriate conditions and safeguards, grant a special permit for such uses, structures, conditions, and no others. I read that as we have the option of applying the five criteria. So if we choose, for whatever reason, not to apply the 5 criteria, in order for us to say yes, it needs to demonstrate that it meets the 5.
Yeah.
But we don't necessarily have to test it.
It's once we get to the point
Do
that we
you
feel.
agree? I mean, that's my interpretation.
I do.
Agreed. So when we get to the point where we feel comfortable with a project as a
Then we
final,
test it to the 5 criteria,
to make sure that we haven't left the town with something that,
like the tight tank, right?
yeah,
You know, so far, and I'm trying to understand what our mission is, right? Because it's kind of loosely defined. Everything that we've approved so far on the lake lots, the test that I've used is that if it burnt down, would they be granted a permit to reconstruct, right? And the bylaws are very specific on if a structure, a non-conforming structure burns down, you're allowed to replace it with something of like kind and quality. And I think pretty much within a few degrees, everything that I've been involved in that we've approved would meet that litmus test, right? Every one of them is similar in character, similar in size, similar in footprint. You know, maybe they're moving a detached garage and making it an attached garage to create some more of a buffer from the road, but we haven't had a situation, and to turn a cottage into a home. At some point, the cottage was turned into a home, right?
Right.
And now they're looking to turn it into a larger home. And you know, it's the ask is just, I think that as a board, it's really important that we retain our flexibility where there is a hardship or where something is necessary, but I think that there's an element of it's important for residents of the town when they buy a non-conforming lot or a non-conforming structure to understand within the bylaws what their range of action and potential future changes is before they make that purchasing decision.
And on the flip side, if you're a neighbor and you buy next to a non-conforming lot, like, what's your expectation for what they're gonna be able to do there? And next to any lot, right? Like, if you come and you read the zoning and you say, like, here's the maximum my neighbor can do, you know? And then to have that not upheld, you know, like, I think that would be a bad place for us to be too, you know?
I certainly would like to, you know, I mean, if I lived there, I would much prefer the proposed plan to what he has. I understand why they're asking for that, and I'm sure that the quality and the aesthetics and the, you know, their existing house is exceptionally well maintained. It's a beautiful home and an asset to the lake. I'm sure
Certainly
that
not gonna
whatever
take
addition
away
they
from the
put on it
neighborhood.
Yeah.
would be, you know, they wouldn't spare expenses. It would be, by no means be an eyesore. It's just, it has a huge visual impact on.
Right. And during the open discussion, you know, there was talk about, Mike mentioned the additional tax revenue, the value the house would bring, and the neighbors are all coming in saying, yeah, let's do it, and none of that has anything to do with the bylaw.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Right, I mean, it's well over that 30%, right?
Yeah.
By
The bylaws
65%.
represent the will of the voters, you know, all this stuff got passed in town meeting at some point, this is what
Right.
they wanted us to uphold, you know?
A lot of discussion about the master plan that
Yeah.
the town has and its intents and. I can tell you guys in the past, we have scrutinized, this is nothing new.
Yeah.
of trying to come, you know, some of them were the camps that they were trying to increase dramatically the sizes, and we would talk about doing more like your theory of, if there was a fire, what kind of, not by right, but by right. Because when a fire does give some by right laws to put something back, I guess that is typically kind of the way the projects have gotten approved. And when they come in front of us that's different than that, they've created a lot of discussion
Yep.
on all the board's part, you know, like.
And then-
And Jamie's right, most of the lake properties were tear downs, making them better.
Yeah, new septic, this,
Septic,
that,
yeah.
updating the home.
Ridge line substantially the same, right? It's
I can honestly say that that is the truth of what typically gets,
Yeah.
sometimes what typically, the second story is typical though. I mean, most of them come with a one-story camp and they're trying to make a home out of it, are looking for 2 stories.
Yep.
I think some of the discussion through this whole process, we tried to talk our way through all the different things that, and I think at the end of the day, we have a project that he wants us to vote on the way it's proposed.
Sure.
It's large in size, it's into a side setback, there are other options that could be explored, that could come back in front of our board, that would allow him to do an addition on his home that may encompass and still require, well, no matter what, he has to get a special permit because of the non-conforming
No, actually, he
lots.
could go up to 30%
Mm-hmm.
without creating an additional non-conformance and be
You put something on
good
like,
without even talking to us.
yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
as long as he
You can
still
skip
meets all the,
Yeah.
oh, that's right, because yep,
Right.
yes, yes.
So
I
if you-
remember one
So it's
that
not a-
came in front of us that the back small addition didn't actually, yeah.
It's a no to this, not a no.
Right, it's not saying you can't
Right.
build a garage here, it's saying this version of the plans, the specific one.
So I think
Does it
Lynn will
work?
agree, so if, you know, and we have to have good reason why.
And, you know, our discussion.
So let's talk
He said,
about-
like, if we move it, he said, like, it causes all these other problems. So what he's saying, like, the priorities are not the bylaws, you know? It's like, if it's somewhere else, we have these other problems we don't like. And he wasn't
But
clear about what they were.
that's his problem
And
to
he said,
solve,
the only
though.
problem with this one is the
Yeah,
bylaws
you
in
brought
the
some
way,
good
you know?
points tonight. We
Unfortunately.
started trying to become too much a problem solvers when,
Yeah.
let them come back with something, they're gonna get a vibe from our opinion that,
Well, they have the ability to watch
They
this
can watch this,
conversation,
yeah.
right?
They might be
So
watching it. Oh,
they-
yeah, yeah.
They should, right?
yeah,
I
no,
hope
no,
they
no,
are.
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the discussion too, and we're not so much, I mean, we are, I guess, kind of trying to problem solve it a little bit, but I think we're also opening the door like we've done in the past to say,
It's like the engineering.
hey, we're not
can
really
figure it
that
out better than
comfortable
we
with
can,
it,
You know, yeah.
Well, this one is,
you know?
Again, it's two major
It's well
elements.
over the 3%.
Yeah, it's too big on the blueprint and it's in the setback. I mean,
Yeah.
that's two.
He's not looking for a
pieces.
foot or two, or he's not
No.
looking for 33%, or he's not, you know, it's a serious ask.
so let's have some discussions of why we're not gonna do this.
Okay.
You know,
We need
not-
to go
not,
through
you
the
know,
checklist, right?
Yeah.
That would be
Well,
the best
no,
way.
I don't believe it, so the checklist comes into play once we're kinda all in agreement and as a final, but we should be, I think what Jamie's getting at is the way the bylaw's written, in his opinion, that we should feel comfortable with the project, and if we do, and we feel as though like we don't, there's other options.
But we
the
have to-
checklist shouldn't come
You
into
have to
play until
justify
we-
why you're denying it.
Right, that's
When
what I
one of
was
those
gonna say.
justifications is it's well over the 30%.
I don't think
Right,
so.
yeah, yes, we do, we
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, we need to
That's what that's what I
justify it.
wanted to discuss.
Yeah.
We
Right.
want
He
point blank
appeals
have
it.
good,
You definitely need to justify that.
Yeah.
Okay.
you just wanna
Because
have.
my
And so
understanding
it's
was like,
excessive size.
it's
We
like
owe them that, you know, like you
justification.
come in front of a board, if
Yeah.
we're gonna say no.
I mean, yeah, the
Yeah,
two
just like
reasons
an
are very
approved-
clear, I think,
yeah.
you know, yeah.
So
Yeah,
like,
the
just
same
let's
way
get
we
them
would
clear, 'cause we have to make
justify-
the motion.
Sure.
I think we have to say the reasons why.
Yeah, just like if we approve something, we need to
Yeah.
justify why we grant it, we need to justify why we didn't.
So,
So,
Jamie, that bylaw, what,
So,
what exactly is that? 'Cause
Certain uses, structures, or conditions are designated as special permit in Section 3, Table of Use Regulations, and elsewhere in this bylaw. Upon application duly made to the board may, in appropriate cases and subject to appropriate conditions and safeguards, the operative word there is the board may, grant special permits for such uses, structures, or conditions and no others, right? And then in acting upon an application for a special permit, the board shall take into account, or shall take into consideration, in acting upon an application for a special permit, one more time, the board shall take into consideration the following 5 things.
But what was that thing about the 30%, he's at 60,
So if
that is
you
a
go
reason for that,
to,
just that so he can,
if you go
Say
to
Which is in the,
Section 1C2D,
Mike's got 'em.
1C2D,
you need 'em?
You can read them out loud.
any non-conforming structure may be extended by right up to 30% of the square footage of its footprint, as long as no non-conformities are created or increased. So that's what he has the right to do without coming to us in a non-conforming
Up
structure.
to 30.
Any increase beyond 30% or creation increase of a nonconformity shall only be allowed pursuant to special permit granted by the ZBA in accordance with Section 7A.
it's both, yeah. Both more nonconformity and both.
So he
Over the
creates an
30%.
additional nonconformity with
Exceeds
the
the
side
30%.
setback.
Yep.
And,
Correct, yep.
a non, and
because-
the size greater than, and the increase in size greater than 30%.
Because of the increase in size, he's creating a second nonconformity.
Yes.
because he could come in front of us, meet the side setback,
Mhm.
and be just over on one thing.
He could do he could increase the footprint of his structure by 30% if he stays within the side setback and not even talk to us about it.
Is that, that's correct, right?
yeah.
Okay, no,
John-
just,
John, falls under John's purview then.
right,
All right.
I got a long one here. You want to hear it so far?
yes,
Do
please.
you agree with, I mean, I'm,
Run out of space.
Yeah, I do.
No, it's consistent with the past.
okay.
It's just sometimes I,
Hope this wording is good.
it's hard
The
to
motion
memorize an entire book.
is,
So we put you on here,
I
Jamie,
was
we
just
knew
gonna
you were
say,
that
just
guy.
briefly.
When
You're
you're
the
doing
guy that
manual
can do the
labor,
book.
when you're
Jamie,
shoveling
you
sheep crap,
Five?
you kind of
Jamie,
tend
you
to
can
let
do
things
the
run through
book.
your mind.
you
do
got
the
additions
book.
over here,
The five.
or the 8 or 10.
We're not taking your laminated
No,
card.
there's like 6 things.
My
right?
understanding was that
No, I'm
you
good.
basically have to establish all 5 in order to grant the special permit. Is that true?
No,
like-
you have to. I think if it meets part of the 5, you have the right to do.
So I think what
No,
Jamie's
I
saying,
think you have to do all
Conditions
5.
Unless it's not a.
so say we all,
Oh, I kind of see what you're saying.
on a different project, like the ones that come in front of us, and we can see it's tearing down a camp, it's similar to by right if there was a fire idea. In my head, I've always thought the same. And then we get to the point where we say, all right, before we do this, let's
Gotta
make
go
sure he
through
can do a
boom,
septic,
boom,
he can
boom.
do a well. It, we haven't made it, we didn't just allow a residential house in a commercial development. Like that the zoning's consistent, that
Right.
it's consistent, yeah, that we're allowing the use to be what it was designed for in that area and zoning and that, yeah, I think that's what the checklist comes down to. Yeah. But first, so go ahead, Jamie.
So,
This is a good,
Yeah, I'm set, right?
yep, everyone's good.
So the way I wrote it, the motion to deny special permit for the construction of a garage addition as depicted on site plan reference because the expansion of the footprint is approximately 60 plus 65%, and it says 1C 2D rather than 30%, and proposal to extend into side setback causing a new nonconformity. Should I number them 1 and 2 or anything?
I probably should just say exceeds the 30%.
Yeah.
At 65, because they
Yeah.
can exceed
Yeah.
30%.
Mm.
Right.
As long as you allow them to.
Maybe we shouldn't spell out the exact
I
number
wouldn't
because
say
we're
65,
unclear. I would
yeah.
say it
It
exceeds
exceeds
the
30%,
30%, correct. Yep.
Okay.
because, yeah. we
Expansion
don't-
of the
we don't have
footprint
calculator.
above 30%. How's that? Beyond 30%?
Beyond
And the
the
board
30%.
deems it unnecessary to allow into the side setback with size of lot. He has other options, like we're not
Right.
just,
Yeah.
like, so our denial doesn't stop him from coming up with a different plan.
Right.
He can come back
That
again
could
as long as he
be-
reworks it, you know?
It's a no to this, not a no.
No to this, yeah.
All right, so we have the motion was to deny the request for the special permit. So when we say all in favor, that means we're voting to deny it, just so everyone's clear. All right, so the motion, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Let's go, Mr. Clerk, you get that all written up?
So
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I will make that motion, long last.
How about a second?
Seconded and third.
All those in favor?
Aye.
See you next month.